Hey everybody, welcome back to the Derick podcast. I've got a good friend on here that I would actually like to know more about. So we brought him on to talk about all of his different knowledge-based everything. I mean, you're very versed in a lot of things. This is Brendan Dalley.
I think what they refer to it as is ADD.
I was going to say you're a man of many hats.
ADD.
So how's it going, man? How's everything doing?
Things are good.
Good.
Things are good.
You own multiple businesses. You taught for multiple years.
Yep.
Going over, I've got a whole list of things that we'll talk about. Loan officer, housing market, marketing, teaching, a lot of different things. If you don't want to start off with anything, we'll just dive into it.
Yeah. A lot of people ask me, like, how do I get to this point?
Yeah.
Like, how did you get here? Like, what was that journey like? And interesting enough that my journey actually began in education.
Sure.
And surprises a lot of people is my original degree was in special education.
Okay.
And I worked with students at the high school level with any type of learning or behavioral disorder.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
And I always tell people by far that's my best business and marketing degree because it really dealt with human behavior. It dealt with why people do what they do.
On multiple levels. Yeah.
And from there, I learned, one, as a teacher, you don't make any money. And money is actually a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
So I transitioned out of that and got into the financial market for a while. Don't really like wearing a shirt and tie very often.
You look great today. Anyone on video would know that.
Apparently, I overdressed for the occasion.
I got my backwards hat on.
So again, this is credit to my wife. She usually helps to dress me.
That's good.
That's why you marry up, guys. It helps you with getting dressed in the morning. But yeah, it's been a crazy journey. I would say I am a little ADD when it comes to the things that I've done, but maybe it's more of I'm always that 5-year-old kid is in me that's always like, why? Why is this happening? Why do things happen this way? Why did that person do this? And so as I went through that journey of getting out of education, then first moving into, I got into the financial world a little bit, got back out of that, went into some private education. During that time, I started a master's in counseling, thinking that I wanted to go into the therapeutic side of things. Again, I love the psychology of, why people do what they do. Actually ended up changing gears and got an MBA. And then after my MBA, I went back and got another bachelor's in IT because I wanted to learn how to speak geek. I also, again, I love to learn. Went back and I got additional just certifications, Lean Six Sigma, marketing degrees, not degrees, but certifications in certain areas. Just always looking at, again, why do people do what they do? How do I increase my value? How do I, make more money? How do I help others be more successful? As well as tying into my different passions and things that I've done. And so that led me into, staying in the teaching realm. I got into teaching at the university. I did that for about 10 years. Probably was a little bit of an enigma there because I do have problems with people telling me what to do. I just don't do well with some of that stuff. And like, you have to do it this way. And my gut instinct and my knee-jerk reaction is, oh, yeah, I'll do it differently and I'll do it better.
And I'll show you why.
And in the world of higher education, one thing that I learned is, there's a lot of great people in higher education and there's a lot of not so great people. There's a lot of PhDs that they don't have much common sense because they've never done anything. They've just stayed in that realm. And so that always ticked me off. And so I really tried to do my best to help my students apply the things that they've learned. One of the sayings that I've come up with that I use quite often that came from those teaching days was, everyone's heard the cliche that knowledge is power. And I'd say, that's a partially true statement. The reality is that correct knowledge that is applied to get a desired result, that's power.
There's a little more to it.
Yeah. And
I
so
like that.
Those are the things that I would teach. And that's really what's kind of set the journey in my life is I'm always looking, how do I apply it? How do I get application? Or how do I what is the application behind it? How do I help others to do the same thing? Because I also believe that as other people become more successful, I become more successful. It's not a win-lose type of situation in life. I can be successful in business. You can be successful in business. I can be successful in life. You can be successful in life. And it makes us better.
Yeah.
And so that's really kind of been how my journey began, and as well as what's guided me is those types of philosophies in education and where I've come. And and since then I still go off on tangents. I still do different things, but really it's always geared around, why does that happen? Why is that person successful? Why did that person buy this? What went wrong here, or how can this person be more successful? And there's an intrinsic aspect of when you see other people have success and you're able to help them, there's like, oh man, that was awesome. And it helps you. So,
well, and a lot of that will drive you in the business world. I feel like having those drives to know why and how to do better. And not only that, like when we first met, I think our first conversation is you were asking me what you could do for me. And I was there to sell you a holster. And I remember you were telling me all this stuff that you guys were just on the verge of with the Dalley gear that we'll touch on. And we were talking about putting packages together, or maybe helping me. You mentioned our website and what you could do to help out on that. And I was just kind of like, this is a guy that I want to definitely keep in touch with and hopefully move forward with in the future. And I've always tried to keep in touch with you. And I always remember that first few conversations we had.
That was good. Good food too, with over there at your family's.
25 Main.
Yeah, 25 Main with your families. I guess it's your families, right?
Yeah.
Families, right?
Yep.
So that was good. And again, that just helping other people it's just not only the right thing to do, it's the fun thing to do. But there's just so many ways that people can benefit from each other.
Yeah.
And of course what you do, I think, is always like, first time I met you, I'm like, this is awesome. This guy's doing awesome stuff.
I make it look
I
a
need
lot
to know
better
this
than it
guy.
is.
I need to stay in touch with this guy because he's doing awesome things.
Well, it's to give an example, like with our safe store, when I went into the current safe store, I had the brands of Browning and Fort Knox. I had gone to Dixie Gun and Fish and talked to Jake Erickson over there and just kind of said, hey dude, because I had my holsters in his store. And I said, hey, I'm going to start this, or not start this. I'd had it for 2 years, but open another storefront for safes. I think I'm going to put some other stuff in there. We had talked to you about bringing ammo in.
Yeah.
And so I was like, we're going to do just kind of a shooting supply without the guns. And he was like, well, dude, I've got a couple overstock safes that we kind of some back stock on. You want to throw some of those in there and see if you can move them? And I was like, yeah. So we kind of sat down and hashed out an agreement between both of us on his inventory. And we put a couple safes in there. And within a week and a half, they were all sold. Like I was sold out of safes. And I was thinking like 8 safes. Then we'll kind of have some, bring in your shooting cradles and bring in ammo and bring in shirts and hats and, that kind of thing. That was my dream when I thought about that store. Well, now today, I've unloaded 3 semis full of safes in the last couple weeks, and we have probably 70 safes in stock. And so, and that's all that we have is the whole store is packed full of safes.
Yeah. I come in and salivate every time, whenever I see all the new safes and everything else. So no, it's cool to see how those pivots occur.
Yeah.
I think that's a good lesson. So again, teaching moment here is, a lot of times we're locked in on this idea of what is it we want to accomplish. But if we're not open to the ability to make those changes, we could actually, screw ourselves up and lose out on opportunities with not being open to like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, hey, this can go in this direction. And that's a lot of what we did with Dalley gear.
Yeah.
Same type of thing. We started in one direction, and it just led into a lot of other directions. I think the biggest thing out of Dalley gear for me has been really the connections with people. It was, I mean, we made money through the process with things and doing a lot. And I've scaled quite a bit back with things because, again, allowing where the direction has taken me with things. But the true value has always been the connections I've made and the people I've met along the way. And they've increased my life tremendously, not only financially, but in all other areas of wellness, mental, spiritual, physical, whatever it might be.
Yeah, having those relationships with multiple people in multiple different walks of life, all it does is it just gives you bridges that you can go in any way. And burning those, having that attitude or burning those bridges is also a bad thing, right? But the more relationships that you're going to have with different, and when we're business owners, it's a big thing too. Like full circle on the safe store, like now we're a safe store. We're not a shooting supply store. Yeah. And having that relationship with Jake ended up getting to where we're at now. Through the last year, if I didn't have Champion as one of our lines through Jake, I wouldn't have a store right now because that was the only thing that we could get through the COVID, inventory downfall. And without that, I would have had to shut the store down because I just wouldn't have had inventory to sell. And so having all these different bridges and different relationships, it opens up more doors for you to, go the different ways and pivot and be able to meet more people, I guess. And it just keeps multiplying.
Yeah. That's the one thing I would highly suggest for anybody who's listening to this podcast is people always matter. Now, there are stupid people out there.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong. Dealt with stupid people. I am a stupid person at times. I'm a horse's butt at times. But, people matter. And at the end of the day, people will always matter. And it's through those relationships that really will create your life in all the aspects of your life. The wealth aspect, your spiritual side, even, physical, everything. And people always matter. And so when I look at where I'm at today, it's because of those relationships. I look back at, say in every point of the careers I've had or the jobs I've had and everything that I've done has always centered around people. From my very first job, it was based off of references and people who knew people and were able to get me into, this position or this position. And, I look at when I taught it all those years at Dixie College, at Dixie State University, how, it was really, hey, Brendan, you got to go in and talk to this person. I said, that'd be fun to go in there and teach. And so I went in there and said, hey, so-and-so told me to come in and talk to you. And, I'd love to teach a class for you. And for me, the timing of it was just perfect because the guy who was there at the time, the dean of the business college, he was actually looking at the schedule for the next semester or however far they're out. And I guess, it was the next semester. And he's trying to fill in and he's turns his book around. He's like, can you teach any of these classes? I'm like, well, yeah, I can teach those classes. He's like, great, I'm going to put you down and teach those classes. That's how I got hired.
Really?
And it was through really the relationship of, who referred me to come over to meet with him. And
yeah, you don't suggest anybody just go walk off the street and do that. But because of the relationships you had, you not only opened the door, but cemented that relationship with the dean for that to happen.
And I was like, hey, do you want to see me teach?
Do
you want me to do
you want to do test?
You want me to do it? He's like, oh, no, you're good. And
exactly.
Granted, that was a few years back and things have changed since then.
Yeah, St. George is a lot different 10 years ago.
Our university's got a little bit different from then as well. But it was just those relationships. And, from there, the impact that I had, hopefully on the students that I worked with and the other people within the community, again, it led to the next thing and it led to the next thing.
Where does that come from, though? I mean, I can draw straight parallel lines to my dad on that and not judging people and trying to help people. And my dad actually taught the same stuff. Peer tutors in my head, because that's what it was when I was in high school. But with handicapped kids.
That's special ed.
Special ed.
Yeah.
So my dad taught that, and I think he got it from that, but then he always taught us. Like, I remember sitting in a car talking to him, and I was telling him this kid that was, I don't know how old I was, sitting alone in lunch, and he was a new kid, didn't know anybody, and he was like not mad at me, but he was like, I can't believe you didn't go over and talk to him, and it didn't even cross my mind. I was just sitting with my friends and to notice someone over there alone. And so the next day I went over and talked to him, and I mean, we're still friends now. And so that's who my dad always was. Like, everybody's got a story, but we're all going through this life together. That was one of the great things about my dad, is he was a relationship guy, 100%.
Yeah, my dad was an entrepreneur. He owned his own business. He didn't do well working with people, so I'm pretty sure that's where I got that authority issue from.
That's me. Bit. Yeah, I understand that.
Just didn't do well with it. But yeah, my dad was a people person. That's what made him great. I watched him, and I actually loved being with him. I'd go to, he was an appliance repairman. That's what my dad did. And he was awesome at it. And I would go out with him. From when I was a little kid, if I could just hold his screwdrivers, went in, and he took me on the job with him. So I learned that, and I probably wasn't very conscientious of all the things that I was learning at that time. But looking back, I can see, how he worked with people. And my mother was the same way. I mean, my mother ran basically the front end of it, and she was always working with clients and people that were coming in, from an early, as long as I can remember as a kid, I never just picked up the phone. Like, we never just picked up the phone and said hello. It was always, because we had stuff was run through our home. Like, whenever we picked up the phone, we would be like, Dalley's.
Yeah.
I thought that's how everybody should answer the phone. It was like what their last name is. I would always answer the phone like Dalley's.
That's funny.
And someone would say something, and I'm like, hold please, let me get someone to help you. And here I'm, a little kid, whatever it might be.
That's awesome.
So I learned a lot of that from my parents, and just that, I guess, the business drive and the communication to it. I think where a lot, like going through high school and things like that, I tried to play sports. I think too, I look at a genetic disposition or whatever it was, but I was a pretty insecure kid. And so I played it off. I mean, most people would never guess that I had, major insecurities or whatever it might be. And I wasn't that outgoing. And to this day, a lot of people think, they're like, man, that guy is so extroverted. And I think I'm more of an introvert than anything else.
I'm the same way.
Like, yeah, I can get up and I can do a presentation. I can talk to people. I don't mind talking to people. I love talking to people. But to recharge my batteries, like, I need alone time.
Yeah.
So it's some of my hobbies that I do, and things that I've done, like photography and things like that. It's like, why do you love photography so much? I'm like, because trees and rocks don't talk back to me.
It's like you need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't want to always talk to people. But I learned how important that communication was growing up. Struggled with it a little bit even in high school. Faked it, had my own insecurities of things. But I think a big part is I served an Lds Mission. Wasn't planning on it. I wasn't that spiritual giant of a kid or anything else, but I had this epiphany one time of like, okay, I need to go know, what my parents know. I can't be on their coattails. And I served a mission, and it was probably a pretty horrible missionary in that sense, because I wasn't really good at the authority side of things. But I learned really quick of how important it was just to be genuine and to talk to people. And I started to realize that growing up in southern Utah, I really was in a bubble, and I didn't know a lot. And I didn't experience other cultures. And I served down south. So I spent 2 years down in Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi area.
Okay.
And that was an eye opener for me, because I'm like, wait a minute, where am I? I was in places where it'd show up and there was corrugated metal for the roof and dirt floors, a potbelly stove inside, and
yeah, that's a lot different.
I'm like, we're in America. Like,
yeah.
This is not happening. And so I started to really understand culture. and seeing things differently and understanding other people's viewpoint. That is like, oh, there are other people who see things differently, and they're still good people.
Yeah.
And so again, that communication side of things, of really learning how to talk to people, understanding their side of things. And don't get me wrong, I'm still a pretty judgmental person. I judge people all the time.
You're like, I'm mainly still human, guys.
Yeah, I am not a saint by any way, shape, or form, and I judge the crap out of people, but mainly for fun. I just judge people for fun. I don't throw rocks at them. But you started to see people differently, and you started to listen to people, and you've got strong views, especially on the religious views when you're down south. And so I started really like, but these are, it's good people. You don't have to agree the same way, have to think the same way that I think, and you can still be a really good person. And you can still be, Christ-like. You can still have all these great attributes, but we don't have to be the same. And that was really the beginning of expanding my bubble. I don't know if we ever get out of our own little bubbles, and starting to see that how important people really were. And it doesn't mean that I don't get along with certain people. There are certain people I don't like. There's certain people I could, care less about at times. I'm not that caring all the time with everybody, but I started to see how, again, people make a difference, and by people being different, that was good.
Right.
If we were all the same, if everybody was like me, we'd get nothing done.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to take that back to that, because that's what I was going to say. But having all those different people and the different mentalities, and I mean, that's what makes everything, that's what makes the world go around. You kind of touched on this, and I've had this thought a lot, so let me ask it to you. And this is just a random thought. Do you think that anybody in high school has like concrete confidence? No, because I was that kid too. Like, I was faking it, and I was faking it to the best that I could to feel good about myself, or whatever you want to put to it. And like, the more I talk to people, the more I'm like, wait, you weren't either? Like, you were just trying to figure. And I'm like, well, yeah, we were 16-year-olds, like, we didn't have anything figured out.
Yeah. It's interesting. This next year, I'm going to have my 30th class reunion.
Wow.
And it's funny because I have a lot of friends today, and a lot of people, we still talk on Facebook, and we were not friends in high school. Like, we didn't hang out together very often, and I was pretty friendly for the most part for everybody. But again, I kind of kept to, like everybody else, you kind of keep to your own clique. But today, all those people are like, yeah, they're my friends.
Yeah.
And, we didn't hang out together, and, we didn't date, we didn't do, whatever it was. But now you look back at it and you're like, it's kind of awesome. But as a kid, as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, we're just so wrapped up in ourselves.
Right.
And we think everybody is like, holy crap, everybody knows I'm really insecure or whatever it might be. And
I'm getting judged by everyone, and the world goes around me.
We're trying to fake it. We're, all sorts of things. There's still so many lessons that I'm learning with people. And like I said, I still deal with people, and I still struggle with people, and still have my own insecurities. I fake it a lot.
I think we all do.
It's like right now. I actually don't want to really be here. I'm faking it. No, I'm just kidding.
Like, wow, live on air.
No desire to be under the lights here.
I'll be honest, man. I'll be honest. No jokes. I don't love this either.
I'm just kidding. I actually do.
Well,
this is fun for me.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, like you were saying, like, you do presentations, you've taught, you've done all that. That scares the crap out of me to think of like me being up in front of 100 people. And then like, I have to detach, knowing that, we have episodes that have, a couple hundred views. Like I think we have one that's over 400 or 500 views now. And to think that like that many people have seen me like sitting here, like, kind of freaks me out.
The good news, you may get 6 off this one.
Yeah, oh, good. 600?
No, 6 people.
You're like, I'm going to take that crown.
Oh, man. No.
So going back to this, like, it freaks me out. But I had a conversation today with one of my buddies, Tyson. He was on the podcast too. And we talked about being comfortable and what that does to you, your mentality and your drive and everything. And I've really, the last couple of years, tried to not be comfortable. And when I could feel that whatever aspect of my life becoming comfortable, I'll try to put a goal in front of that to put me out of my comfort zone. And that's how this was born. That's where the podcast came from, is I always kind of wanted to do one because I talk a lot. And I've told this story on here before, but like I have friends that have cool stories and have been through things and have, things that someone else could learn from. And like, not necessarily do I think I should have my own podcast, but it gives me a platform for other people to come on and talk. And that's why I did it. And
it's fun.
Yeah. I mean,
it's fun to learn about people. For me anyway, it's fun to have those conversations. Again, the relationship side of things. You can't get that anywhere else without just, you gotta sit down and talk about things. And those things can be anything. But if we get into, this is the world of business that I live in, where I deal with so many times with people who think that this business card that they present is like, here's my business card. And I'm like, I don't care. I have business cards too. I have lots of business cards from lots of businesses.
Anybody can print a business card.
Yeah, anybody can print a business card. Nobody cares about your business card. Now, you may have some cool ones, and they may care a little bit more. I have one that someone gave me that was metal, and I'm like, that is kind of cool.
Yeah, I've had that too.
So I keep that one around. So probably ought to get metal business cards. But it's really just about the person. And that's the fun part about this is, there's going to be a connection because we've had this conversation and we've got deeper. I tell people all the time, the thing, if we ever want to move past all the crap that's going on in the world today, then we have to have these meaningful conversations. And not a meaningful conversation, because the media creates a meaningful conversation to create division. What they're trying to do is they're trying to create these meaningful separations is what's happening. One of the coolest experiences that I've had in class, in the classes that I taught, was we'd get into, I'd have very diverse classes. And a lot of it was, I had some great counselors that, they knew who I was, and they would put people into my class because they're like, this would be a good fit for you.
Yeah. Because
we had a lot of diversity in that. And again, it helped me to overcome, my own bubbles and my own judgments, and working with these different kids from all sorts of backgrounds, races, religions, sexual orientation, whatever it might be. Now, I have my viewpoints, with what I believe, but I'm working with all these kids that have different beliefs and everything else. And it was interesting that one of the things that I would start to do with them is we would do these exercises where we would start finding commonality. And they would go around, and I would, kind of force it upon them to find commonality one with another. And the more specific that they could find commonality with each other, the whole communication filter amongst them changed. And I saw this happen where I had this big old black kid out of Vegas come sit in my class one day. Or he had him in a number of classes, and he showed up to my office one day. And he sits down and start having a conversation, and he's kind of going through some tough times. He breaks down and he's crying, and he's just going through some tough times with some family situations. All the different things are happening, and he stops, kind of shakes his head a little bit, and he looks up, and this big old smile comes across his face, and he's like, who would have ever thought that this big old black dude would be sitting here crying in this old white man's office? He's like, thanks, Dalley. Yeah. He's like, because that's what you taught us, is because we have stuff in common. Yeah, we had there's an age difference.
Yeah.
but we had things in common, things that we liked, things that we can share, interests that we had that were alike. And because of that, our communication started to change. And that's, I think, what's happening in today's world is the media does not want that. And they do a really good job of creating differences. Mm-hmm. All these stupid movements, and I don't care, people can be pissed off at me, but all these movements that are happening right now are only making the problem worse, because they're not looking to truly unify. There was a difference. They try to go back and say, well, here's, Martin Luther King did these types of things. Well, there was a whole different situation going on, and the way that the media was used and everything else, where he was trying to create unity, I believe, with what he does. But yeah, he did have to stand up for his, he had to hold his ground, and there was human rights that are going on. Yeah. We are well past that, in that sense of how that was done and what was, going on and what's going on today. Today, the whole point is to actually create division. And so what it's like, we want unity, but only if you agree with what we're doing. Yeah. And we try to, they like the separation, because when we separate people and when we create division, there's a control mechanism. And so they're actually controlling you. So when they separate you, they're now controlling you. And I think, with people today, we get caught up, and I do as well. I mean, I get as ticked off as anybody else with things, but I have to step back and realize that they are controlling us. The media, whoever those, the swamp is that we call the swamp, there's a control mechanism that's happening there, because they're trying to they want the differences, and they want to really focus in on those differences, because commonality would heal us. Commonality was what would help us in our community. Yeah. And it's tough, because human nature is, the way that we protect ourselves in life is, whenever I see something that's different than me, my psychology is different is bad. We get taught that, and there's a safety thing. It's when we were kids, the stranger danger type of situation. Yeah, stranger danger is an important thing. If you a stranger, it's danger. It's like, so we grew up, my generation, we grew up that anybody that we didn't know was going to rape us or kidnap us.
That was the fear.
It was the stranger danger type of thing. But what that did is, it initially was there to try to protect us. But what it started to do is, we started to look at people differently, and we say, oh, wait a minute, they're different than us. They're bad. And so that's just been ingrained in us, and it's been ingrained throughout history. That's why, wars have been fought, is there's this difference. We focus in on this difference, and we're going to fight about it. And those differences, what we have to fight against now is, we have to look at more of the big picture of things and say, wait a minute, they're different. Okay, but what's the context here? What's the situation? Where am I? I tell kids, like, okay, if you go to Maverick at 2 a.m. and you see somebody, it's all tatted up, neck tats, everything else. I mean, again, nothing wrong with that. But you see that at 2 o'clock, and that's not you. Maybe he's got some teardrops on his eye. You're not going to go up to him at 2 o'clock in the morning and be like, hey, can you give me a ride home? Yeah. You're probably going to end up in the desert somewhere. Sure. So, all right. So, but maybe there's a different situation where you may feel going up and talking to that individual. If it was, you're at a biker convention or something. I don't know. I mean, you have to understand the context of when those things are bad, and when it's not so bad to say, okay, that guy's creeping me out, I need to stay away from him. And to another time, it was like, hey, need some help with something or whatever. Yeah. You have to understand the situation. So by us, we have to fight against that gut instinct that says that different is bad. We have to look at it as different is different. Now let's make the judgment of the situation. And is this a security safety issue that's going on? That's the different is saying, hey, maybe I just need to not go ask this guy for a ride at 2 a.m. Or is it a situation, just because that person is different, I'm not going to help them on the side of the road because they got a flat tire, because they're a different skin color, or they do have tats, or whatever it might be. I mean, I have a lot of friends that have tattoos.
Yeah.
I could never do it because I don't like needles. I'm petrified of them. But again, it's just, you have to start getting past that point. And I think that's where so many people, and that's where we're failing today, is we're focused on differences. And the media is doing a really good job of trying to say these differences must unite us. No, commonality is what's going to unite us. I think that's
a good point.
That's a huge part in everything that we do. And again, a big part of the businesses that I run and that I've been a part of. And it's helping me get past that, stuck up, judgmental attitude that, I may have sometimes.
Well, I just thinking through as you're talking about that, I take the example of, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to offend anybody. Like, let's talk gays. Like, if you're gay or whatever you want to call it.
Let me tell you something about being offended. This is another one.
Okay.
First of all, I believe that people, nobody can offend you. You can only allow yourself to be offended.
I agree. 100%.
And granted, I've never been in, some of the other people's shoes that have gone through different things, but I've been called lots of different names. And some I agree with and some I don't agree with.
Like good looking.
Like, horse's butt.
Horse's butt.
Swear words, whatever it might be. In fact, one of my favorite things I always tell people, and this sets the ground and really makes people wonder really about me is, I used to tell people all the time, it's like, it's not that I'm cocky, I'm just better than you.
Well,
and so,
facts.
But again, Mr. Insecurity right here.
Right.
That's, try to pose that. And I used to joke around like that, but of course that always sent the wrong message. But people are being they're allowing themselves to be offended.
Sure.
But again, you talk about, the things that are happening. I have lots of friends, lots of acquaintances, people I hang around with that, they're gay.
Yeah.
Great.
Well,
I still love you. That's great. But the problem I have with it is quit making the division.
Right. So that's what I was going to get to. Is like, I don't care that you are, but the select people that try to push it on me that I have to be okay that they are, even though I already am okay that they are, like that's what causes the friction. Right. And so it's always interesting to me because I'm sure there are guys that are not okay with it or people that are not okay with it, but like, I don't care. But then it has to be put in your face the whole time.
Insecurities.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's jump down. Let's go. I mean, dude, I've got a whole list I want to go through with you. Let's just, we touched on this. Let's just jump right into this one. What you think, what I wrote down, what's going to happen to the Second Amendment? So I know you're heavily involved in that. So am I with our businesses. We're even part of the same communities in St. George with that.
So this is interesting because it ties into some of the stuff that we talked about. They're like, Brendan, you are contradicting yourself.
Okay.
In the sense of like, the whole, not judging people, these types of things of, we should all find commonality. Well, great. Yeah, we should. But we also need to be smart. And not everybody's going to have those same thoughts. And there are those people who, it doesn't matter if you have something in common with them or not, there are bad people out there. And so I fully believe in protect yourself, protect your family. And especially on the Second Amendment, a lot of people they totally don't understand the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Nor do they have I don't know, it's, I get accused and people who are like-minded, we get accused a lot of this, you're just, a conspiracy theorist, you're out of touch with reality, this idea of protecting yourself against the government, that was back in the days of, muskets and, horses and everything else. That would never happen in today's world. Of course, my reaction to that is, well, it's happening today, not only in our country, but look at all the other countries that have happened, things that have happened. Venezuela, you look at what's happened with them over our lifetime. We look at, just a lot of these different countries who have, you look at Iran and Iraq, you look at pictures, not too long ago, the prosperity within those cities, and now they're war torn in a lot of areas. I have friends that come from those areas, and it's really interesting to see what's happened in really a short amount of time. And so the Second Amendment is more relevant today than I believe it was even in the times of our founding fathers when it was created, and what they thought about. I look at what's happened in Australia.
Right. I was going to say Australia.
That's a great example. And for a long time they touted like, oh, look at Australia. They took away all their guns and look how much better they are. Now they're getting like beaten, thrown in jail for not wearing a mask, not doing something that has no scientific evidence to say that makes a difference.
Right.
I'm like, I have to laugh. Again, my thinking and my logical thinking behind that is, if we both had a mask on and I had eaten like Taco Bell, all yesterday, there's a good chance I'm going to have some atrocious farts going on right now.
Sure.
And if we have a mask on, you're going to smell it.
Yeah.
And you're saying a fart is more powerful than COVID?
Right.
It's like, it's a simple.
Taco Bell's probably killed more people than COVID anyway.
Yeah, no kidding.
Don't shut me down, Taco Bell.
I know I just lost credibility with a lot of people because they're like, he goes from this level of talking here and then he goes to like this 12-year-old boy about farts. And so, ladies, if anybody's listening to this podcast,
my mom is going to be sick. That's the F word to her.
Mallory as well. You just realize that we never grow out of the stage of like, fart is always going to be a funny word to us. It's like,
so we were not allowed to say fart growing up. It was the F word to my mom. So we always just said fudge. And so we'd have friends come over and it was always fudge. And then we'd get in trouble because my mom knew we were trying to say her F word, fart.
My wife had that same environment. Could never say fart. Her mom to this day would never say fart.
I mean, yeah, if you said it in front of my mom now, she'd be like, I can't believe that you'd say that. My oldest brother, same way with his kids. They don't say fart.
Really?
Yeah.
Man. I
how can you keep a straight face when you say it?
It's like the Beavis and Butthead moments. I'm just like, again, the 12-year-old boy in me comes out. I'm like, oh, that's funny stuff. But yeah, going back to Second Amendment, getting back on topic of things.
Farts will derail you.
Farts, yeah, it will get you every single time. That's why I think Second Amendment is so important. We see it today. We see where Australia's at today, where the authority is not afraid of the people because there's no way to fight back.
Right.
And I think that's what sets us apart in that sense. And I think that's what, especially our community here in Southern Utah, there's a huge division, I know, even within Utah. I look at my friends and family who live up north, and when they come and travel down here, like I remember like during the real big COVID times of, the whole mask things, my brother would come down and I'd be like, dude, take your mask off.
Yeah, that's how you would know.
Before I get judged.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, sorry, man. It's like everywhere up there. It's like if you don't have a mask on, they're glaring at you. It's like, it's just the opposite down here. Yeah. You put a mask on, people are like, what's wrong with him? Let's get him out of here. So
when we go back and forth with the safe manufacturers are mostly in northern Utah. Well, all of mine are in northern Utah. And I would go up there, no mask. And they'd be like staring at me, and then they'd come down here, and I'm like, dude, take your mask off, man. Like, we're just going to grab some dinner. Like, relax.
It's crazy. So I think it's more important than ever to be well armed, be trained in that. I will say for the record that unfortunately I'm going to have to get some more guns because all mine, I lost them in a boating accident.
Yeah.
They're all gone. So
you too, huh?
Yes, I don't have any guns at all. They're all bottom of Lake Powell.
Lake Powell. Well, that's almost empty
That's
now.
almost
So.
empty, so I might be able to find them. We were down there a few weeks ago, and I'm like, it's like 80 feet down.
So I hadn't been there since I was like 9 or 10 probably. And we went a couple weeks ago it's actually like my in-laws in-law, like kind of invited us down. And so I didn't really know how full it ever was, but you can see like the water lines up on the rocks.
Yeah.
And you sit there like you're down, I mean, they're 50 feet above you on some of these water lines. And I'm like, good heck, like this is a big old lake when it's full.
Yeah, that's crazy. But here's the other interesting side of that. I was talking to a guy down there, and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, I remember when it was lower than this.
Really?
So there's the ebbs and flows of, those types of things, the water, the drought. I don't really know how much of that is man imposed to nature imposed. So the other part of me is when you start doing science a little bit more, the scientific aspect of it, nothing is ever destroyed, nor is nothing is ever created. Everything already exists as it is. It may change form. So if water evaporates, it's only changed form. At some point in time, it can change form again.
Sure.
Groundwater, it's just going into the ground, wherever it might be. I mean, a lot of people think it's like, oh, we're losing all this water. This water's gone. No, it's
going somewhere.
It's going somewhere. Now, I don't know where it's going to go into and when it's going to change back into form, and how much is being diverted off by man and everything that we're doing.
Well, we were kind of talking about it because we were on a houseboat out there, and everyone's kind of talking about how low the water is. And then one of the guys just goes, it doesn't matter. This whole thing just has to do with, the snow coming from Colorado or what, and he kind of was like, all your guys' theories are cool, but like, it's just a matter of time till this is full again. Yeah. That's kind of what he kept on going back to.
That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah.
I don't stress out too much about it. It's like, again, living in the desert. As long as I can remember, part of the business world, I guess, there's always this discussion of like, water for southern Utah. Are we gonna run out of water for southern Utah? They've been talking for it for like ever, as long as I can remember. It's like, we're gonna run out of water. Well, okay, that was 15 years ago.
Yeah,
we're gonna run out of water. That was great. When?
Right. Like we're still here, and
I go down to Washington Fields at certain times, and the water table's so low in Washington Fields. You're like, yeah, that's why that place hasn't been developed, or they have to put all that dirt in there because the water table's so low that, okay, well, there's still water here.
Yeah.
Maybe it's I think I've been jaded a lot by the political side of things. It's like global warming, and hopefully this will piss off some of you.
This will get some reactions.
Yeah, I hope so. Global warming does not exist in my eyes. Well, I should say it exists to an extent of when it's warmer, and when it's colder, it's colder. Yes, can we care about our environment? Yeah, is there smog? Is there crap in LA that, could we do things that are better for our environment? Yes. But I can remember, again, in my lifetime, I can remember when the ice caps were going to overtake the world. And it was like the ice caps are growing and we're going to have like this polar freeze. This is in my lifetime. I can remember this. And it's like, okay. And now it's like the ice caps are melting, or maybe they are melting now and they'll grow bigger later. And it's just
a recycle of,
again, nothing's being destroyed. It's just changing form, and it has to go through this process of changing form. And it just becomes so political. It's the same thing with the COVID stuff that's going on. Do I believe COVID exists? Well, yeah, I've seen people. I have had friends who have died, friends who I've gone to school with who have died from COVID. And I don't consider myself that old mentally. I don't act that old, and so I've seen the effects of it with people. I've had most of my friends, a lot of my coworkers have all had COVID. I don't know how I haven't really gotten, because almost all my coworkers have had COVID. And I haven't had a daughter that
Then you should
has COVID.
take your blood and get your DNA and try and duplicate it.
I should be the one that gets COVID. I can explain that one later because I actually should be, supposedly, I am susceptible to those things because I actually have an autoimmune disease. And most people don't know. And I haven't really talked about it very often because it was a pride thing for a long time, but I've kind of come to grips with it. I'll explain that one later.
Sure.
If we get to it. And so, again, I believe COVID exists, but my problem with COVID is how it's being politicized. I look at it as a control mechanism.
Sure. How is it anything else?
Yeah. And so people want to know why I'm, anti this or anti that. It's like, no, I'm a truth seeker. Right now, I cannot necessarily find the truth. I can find things that back up it both ways. And I learned that. I remember in college, I learned how screwed up we are in information is. So getting my original degree was in special education, but I also double majored in physical education and really got into the world of like kinesiology, biomechanics, again, the human body thing. I don't know if I'm right brain, left brain, whatever it is. So, and I remember sitting in one of my classes, I was a sports medicine class or something that we were doing, and we had to do some research on and do a presentation on some of these myths, so to speak. And so I did some research on a topic on carbonation and athletics.
Okay.
And interesting enough, I found studies that supported both, that carbonation hindered your athletic performance as well as carbonation had increases. Drinking cola, I should say. Drinking cola had a negative impact and drinking cola had a positive impact on health performance. So I'm like, great. What's the truth?
Right.
And that's when I started to realize, and this is what's happening today, is, we learned as kids, we learned about the scientific process. And the whole scientific process is, as we create this hypothesis, and what we tried to do is we wanted to disprove the hypothesis. And if we couldn't disprove it, then it turned into a theory. Well, today, they do that just bass backwards.
Yeah.
They say, well, here's my theory, and here's all the ways that you can't disprove it.
Right.
Like, that's completely wrong.
Yeah.
And so that's where I struggle with a lot of this, and started to learn that early on is you can find evidence for anything. And it's all how it's twisted and maybe how you use it, or who knows what. That's the hardest part in finding those types of truths out there. What I refer to as the worldly truths.
Yeah.
The scientific truths. I don't know. So does global warming exist? I don't know. It's just sometimes it's warmer, sometimes it's colder. But am I gonna freak out and and then we're gonna charge an emission tax? Well then it's not about global warming.
Yeah. Say when you're talking about proving it right or proving it wrong, and I've said it on here before too. I'm like, you just gotta follow the dollar. I feel like anything that's that size of scale, you follow the dollar, and you can usually end up where it starts, or who's pushing it, or where the manipulation comes from.
Yep. And that's my struggle. That was my struggle in higher education.
Well, this is my biggest thing with global warming, and then we can go back to our COVID and finding truth. Don't we have global warming every summer? Like we have summer every year. So isn't global warming happen every year?
It's hotter, yeah.
So I don't know. People, I'm like, and I don't act like I know everything in and out about global warming, but I don't understand it as far as that. I guess they would say, well, it's warmer in the winter now too, I guess.
Except for that one time when it wasn't.
Yeah, except for that one time there was 9 feet of snow over on highways in Colorado and Salt Lake.
I was talking to someone the other day about this type of topic, and I grew up hunting all throughout southern Utah, and I had a buddy that owned a little over 2,000 acres up on Cedar Mountain.
Lucky.
And we hunted there all through middle school, high school, even parts of college. And I can remember hunting in October in shorts and a t-shirt and just be like sweating to death.
Yeah.
In October. I can remember hunting in a full-blown like ski suit parka, like freezing, trudging through thigh-deep snow up on Cedar Mountain at other times.
Right.
I've done it all up there over my lifetime. I'm like, why did I, one year it's 6 feet of snow and next year it was, oh crap, it's hotter than Hades up here. I'm in shorts and a t-shirt.
Yeah, because you have to track all that from how the deer migrate from the altitudes.
Yeah.
And so if they're in a different spot every year, then it tells you right there.
Yeah, it's like, hey, so again, no, it's just, some days it's, some winters it's colder, some winters it's warmer. Sometimes, and you span that over decades, it's like, oh yeah, well, sometimes it's warmer, sometimes it's colder.
Yeah.
It's the ebb and flows with it.
Well, I saw a meme with COVID and it said, if you were, like it had the decades broke down. And it was like, if you were born in the 90s, you've lived through 7 world-ending scenarios.
Yeah.
And then it was like, if you were born in the 80s, you've lived through 27 world-ending scenarios. And then it had them listed out. It was like Ebola, swine flu, bird flu, COVID, and global. And I just had to laugh at it because I'm like, I think with social media, I'm a lot more susceptible to it now than I used to be. And just being aware of things other than, what schools bring in the next day. And that's all you really cared about. But it just makes me laugh when I see it. And that's why I'm like, well, I'm just going to live every day and grow my business and protect my family and go on to tomorrow.
Yeah. Take care of what you can take care of.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's enough out there for me to stress about than things that I don't believe are true.
I was talking the other day with somebody about Army men, playing with Army men as kids.
Yeah.
And I can still remember I had an awesome, just tons of Army men. I had the good guys and the bad guys. And what's interesting is the bad guys that Al had, they were all Germans.
Yeah.
When I was a kid. I was born in 1973. And World War II had been, well over.
Yeah.
The World War I, World War II, and the conflict that we had with the Germans. That had been, over for 30 years. And, but yeah, my Army men were Germans. They all had the German helmets. They all had the German uniforms. And those are what we've played with, those are the bad guys. And then later in life, it was the Russians.
Yeah.
Like we were all worried about nuclear war with the Russians, and all everything was the bad people were the Russians, and then continues the transition, and
and then it goes.
It's always going to change. It's just
like Middle East, like Arabs, and
it's crazy. And I think today, what's interesting is I feel like maybe the target's now on our back, and so we're part of that rotation.
That's what I was just going to ask. So who is it now that we're out of the Middle East?
I think the Christians are after the Christians have been a target. The patriots.
Yeah, I agree.
Those are usually a little bit more the God-fearing individuals. I mean, I think that's the target now, and I honestly believe that is we're the ones who are. We're now the enemies. We're the ones in the gray suits now.
You're law-abiding citizens. Yeah.
It's interesting how it shifts. And so going back to, all the things that are happening, we want love, we want peace, we want everyone to get along, but we also have to protect ourselves. And that's why I believe in the Second Amendment. That's why I believe in, making sure that we have a well-armed community.
Sure.
And people know how to use that, and people are responsible. I just heard on the radio today that there was a shooter in Arlington, Texas. And, it's just like so frustrating is, again, then they look at that as, a gun problem. No, it's not a gun problem. It's never been a gun problem.
Right.
Guns cannot kill people. They just can't just see it. It's just like,
Right.
That is not.
It has not shot me.
It has not shot me. It hasn't shot anybody.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just a.
For those of you on audio.
Yeah. So you just saw. It's the Hellcat, if you don't know, with it. It's a desert tan. It's got a laser on it. It's very nice. And the holster was actually made by Derick.
Oh dang! Weapon X holsters.
Sponsored by Weapon X holsters. Get one. It's a people problem.
Yeah.
It's always been a people problem. And
well, there's plenty of ways to kill people. Like you don't have to have a gun to do that. And it happens all the time. People get killed all the time without guns.
Yeah.
And then what they want to call a mass shooting, a mass shooting happens where I was talking to a guy the other day from Chicago, just moved here from Chicago. And he told me this. This is not coming from Derick Leg in Southern Utah, bubble. This is coming from a guy from Chicago, born and raised, just moved here. He was saying he saw the transition go from gang violence. Everything was called gang violence. And within the last 5-7 years, everything's transitioned into a mass shooting or a shooting or a mass shooting to put that action in the guns problem, not the gangs problem or not the mental health problem. Now it's the tool that was used. Oh. And I never really, I guess, because I live here, and he's talking about how many people are shot every night in Chicago. And I'm just like, yeah, but we're the problem, strictest gun laws in the nation.
Yeah. I can't even ship ammo you can't ship ammo to Chicago. It's all restricted.
Yeah, but maybe I need to have him on here, dude, because he was actually an interesting guy. I moved a safe for him. He actually moved here. He had a big Penske truck he was driving, and he had a safe in it. And he comes into my store, and he's like, man, I just need help. I just need to unload the safe. I don't know what to do. Do you know anyone that can help me? And I'm like, yeah, just bring it here, dude. I'll forklift it out of there. We'll throw it on my trailer, and I'll drop it off on the way home. Like he was on the way home from my store. And so that's what we did. And that little bit of time that I spent with him, I was like, dude, you're an interesting dude, and he was, I'm going to butcher the accent, right? But he's like straight out of Chicago, and like he talked like that, dude. And I was loving it. And I told him, I was like, oh yeah, dude, I went to Wrigley Field, checked out. And he's like, oh, Wrigley Field. He's all, no, we Sox fans. I was dying, dude. Frank, if you're listening, come on the podcast, man. Sorry, I derailed us again.
That's all right. Actually, I grew up watching, sorry, Frank, but in good old St. George, we had two television stations that came in. One of them was TBS, which was the Braves, and WGN, which was Chicago Cubs. And so I grew up as a Cubs fan because I watched the Cubs and I watched the Braves play.
Is that why there's so many Cubs fans?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Because that's
who you saw.
That's who we saw on TV. We had WGN and we had TBS here in Southern Utah, were our two channels, so to speak, on when we got cable television. Those were like the...
Yeah. I mean, it couldn't have been because they were any good. It just had to be exact.
They were awesome, man. watching Harry Carey and
yeah, Harry Carey.
Braves had some great teams as well during that time, especially in the 90s. They had Vegas had old Maddox grew up in Vegas. Greg Maddox went to Green Valley High School.
I didn't know that.
So they had some good teams back then. So the Braves were really good. The Cubs they had great players on their team. They had Grace and Sosa. They had the Hawk. They had all sorts of things. Yeah.
It's always next year, though. Like I was kind of bummed when they won it because I worked with a bunch of people in the Hurricane Post office that are Cubs fans. And it always like, oh, dang it, guys, you almost got it. Maybe next year. And then they win it. And I'm like, come on. It's a rebuilding year, right?
Yeah, now it is.
It is now. I was surprised by those. I don't follow baseball. I used to when I was a kid. My favorite sport was baseball. I was one of the one kids that would sit down and watch a 3-hour baseball game, but I was always Yankees fan just because that's when they were good and they were winning everything. And I used to joke that I was named after Derek Jeter. So, it was easy to connect to them. Anyway, I do want to go back to COVID though, because I do want to get your talk. I want to get your thoughts. I want to finish that conversation. So there's division, and I believe that. I think if you're going to conquer, and not to sound like, medieval or anything, but if you're going to conquer a group of people, I believe that the two ways to do it is one, fear, and two is to divide them. I mean, divide and conquer is one of the oldest sayings ever, right? Yeah. But so if you have some thoughts on that, we can talk about that. But where I want to end it is like, why? Like who's doing it and why? And that's where I get stuck.
Well, I think part of the fear aspect is, let's go. I want to touch on that just a little bit,
sure,
because that's that domain I like to play in. That's that 5-year-old, the why question that I have of, where does the fear come from, or how is fear generated? And one of the best ways that we generate fear is through confusion. Confusion creates chaos. Mm-hmm. We as human beings, we don't like to know. We like to know. We don't want the unknown. The unknown, yeah. And if we don't know the unknown, we're going to try to figure it out. We're going to make it up. And so if we create misinformation, we create a division, we create uncertainty, that creates chaos. Chaos creates this feeling of the unknown, and it really starts to create fear. And so I think they're doing a really good job at that. It's
working.
Yeah, it's working. Yeah. There's fear-based. And, you'll see some people, you got people that have 6 masks on and face shield. And,
yeah. Gloves,
everything else. Crazy stuff. And now going back to that question is who's doing this and why? Well, I think that goes back to, it's really just the evolution, or maybe it's the de-evolution. That's not a real word, but where mankind has this tendency to regress with power. And they regress in the sense because I think that power, and maybe it goes back to the insecurities, or it's whatever it might be that's happening in this world with people. But there's something happens when people start to wield power. There's a psychological component that makes people want it more. It is a drug.
Yeah.
And it creates different chemicals within your body that are very addictive. It is that rush that comes along with that. And I think that's where we're at with a lot of it is there's an addiction that comes into it. And once you get some of it, it continues and you continue to wield that power and wield it in a way of, oppression. You think about, everything that we do to make us better, truly makes us better, takes a lot of resistance. You look at athletes and what they go through. To be, I'll get up, and I have a tendency to get to work early at times. And, driving down the road at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., going to work, and I see all these people running on the road. And, of course, my first thought is, who's chasing them? What's going on? Is there a bear after them? Why are they running?
Got them in a car.
What's going on here? But, that takes effort to do that. And same thing with, self-control. It takes effort to withhold certain things. I'm not very good at not withholding against Diet Dr. Pepper. I love that. You and your Mountain Dew.
My Mountain Dew, man.
It takes self-control to do those things. It's overcoming this natural body of ours, and that actually makes us better. I believe that power is the opposite of that it's more encompassing. I think it takes a lot of willpower to not use that power to, harm others, or, a lot of people, they inflict pain, they inflict their will, they're very selfish. I think selfishness it's kind of the Colorado River effect. Selfishness is what's going to happen automatically unless we fight against it. That's that natural genetic component of who we are. To be selfish, to be hurtful, is if we don't do anything, that's that lowest state of who we are. It's almost a primitive survival component. And so a lot of those people who are in power, I don't think that, I think a lot of what they've done is they've lost self-control, and they've now become addicted to it, and it becomes a very powerful, deadly drug that inflicts others. And of course, this is all Brendan Dalley.
No,
thoughts.
Dude, I'm following you.
I've
never thought about it.
It's a whole different way of thinking about it. But it does take effort to be great in certain areas and to do great things that help others. And those people, I mean, it takes effort to do that. It doesn't take effort to, inflict punishment, to, sit up there and, have the easy life of, what's happening there with, a lot of our politicians. They may say, well, it was hard work getting to this point. Well, yeah, it may have been hard work, but you stopped and you no longer have any self-control. You're no longer doing good things, because doing good things takes effort. Being nice to people at times takes effort. And being able to overcome just those natural tendencies. So it's again, I don't know if that made sense.
No, it totally makes sense.
But for me, it's a different way of thinking. And again, maybe it's helping me understand. I'm trying to organize that confusion and chaos into an understanding of why people do it. Now, it doesn't change the fact that it sucks and that they piss me off. But it at least helps me maybe understand maybe what's happening. Maybe helps me to make myself a little bit better.
Yeah, makes you aware.
Makes me aware. Helps me to, maybe treat people differently at times. Again, don't do it all the time. Again, don't hold me to it.
They're gonna be like, that guy was rude to me in fourth grade.
That's right. I was fourth grade. I was still trying to figure out who I was. But I may have been rude to you the other day at Walmart, somebody, so I apologize. And that was probably because you were writing a check
with your coupons.
In front of me, and that was probably why I was mad at you.
Probably didn't take your cart back.
Yeah, something like that. So, but I think it's just I think that's why people do it. I don't, I look at those within our government. I kind of feel bad for them in a way. That doesn't mean that I don't, I'm irritated of what they do.
Yeah, hold them responsible or whatever.
But I'm also irritated for those who keep voting them in a little bit.
Sure.
And I think we live in a world today where I don't believe there is a lot of self-control, and I believe it's promoted, to not have self-control. I believe it's promoted because just do whatever you want. Have whatever you want. Be whoever you want to be. Who would have ever thought that we'd be living in a day and age where they're trying to say being a pedophile is something you're born with.
Yeah.
And it's not just you're born with it, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why is creating harm on a child? How is that ever okay? Again, maybe you have a tendency.
Yeah.
Self-control.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Where self-control.
I'm sure there's a lot of could have been pedophiles out there that have self-control.
And, again, I see the other side too of go back to the discussion on gays. Like I have no idea of, there's people who say, well, it's just a choice. And other people say, well, they're born that way. Yeah. I don't know.
I've never lived that life.
I haven't lived that. I don't know. Right. But what I'm looking at in a whole is, and I think this happens on both sides, is what's the harm that's happening? I think the division is what's the biggest harm. And I think it happens on both sides.
Sure.
Is, okay, you've got one side who's like, we're going to fly this rainbow flag. This is who we are, accept who we are. And it's like, we're different accept us. And again, it goes like this idea of like, well, the basic human nature of people, unless they are aware that different is bad. And so we're saying, we're different. You accept us because we're different. We're not like everybody else. Well, what are you promoting? You're promoting being different. Again, that's fine. But most people they're not there where they can see things as different. But, what's the harm that's created here?
Right.
What is happening? What is happening with families? What is happening in other areas in life that we're not seeing? And again, you can get into all areas of like, from divorce rates. And hey, I'm one of the statistics. I've been divorced. I'm remarried, happily remarried. Mm-hmm. Just celebrated our 14th. But yeah, so I went through those statistics. I went through, and we start to see, what's happening with children who are raised by single parents compared to those that have family. Family dynamics. There's so many little issues that are going on, but it still comes back down to me is like we have serious people issues, and a lot of it, I think is like we're so concerned about trying to say I'm different, that we're not saying we're the same. We have things in common. And once we have those things in common, we can say, well, yeah, I'm glad you're different in those areas, but we also have these things in common. We just need to reverse that just a little bit with things.
Yeah. By pointing out how different they are, they're isolating that group of people where they want to be accepted. And it's like, you're isolating yourself by saying that you're different. Yeah. Like there's 120 things that we're the same on, but that one thing that we're not is what you want to be accepted.
If you went through and did all of the 120 things that we were the same on, and then said, hey, and this is where we're different. Oh,
great.
But look at it where we're all the same, and look what we all have in common.
But that's not the focus. Yeah.
And it takes that higher level of thinking and awareness to be able to look at people. And again, I don't do this all the time with things. We judge people. We talked about at the very beginning of this podcast. I laughed about judging people. Yes, I judge people all the time, but it's a different sense. We all judge people.
Right.
It's what we do with those judgments. And my job is to say, again, why am I judging them? Do I fully understand them? And really, what is it that we have in common? And if that's something that we can build on, or can we just be different?
And that's
I don't have to hate you because you're different, but I don't have to associate you with you either. But I don't have to agree with you.
Yeah.
And that can be on all sorts. That can be religion. That can be,
Second
who your
Amendment.
favorite sports team. That could be you're a Yankee fan who just lost. They just got beat by Boston. And
I was a Yankees fan.
They got played so well off that back wall that they're trying to run with not a super fast runner and throw him out at home plate. But
I couldn't name one Cubbies player right now. I think they traded them all.
They did. Yeah. And they traded one of the good ones to the Yankees.
Yeah. Is that Rizzo? Yeah,
Rizzo.
That's what I thought. I couldn't remember if it was him or the third baseman.
Yeah. I'm not even well versed anymore.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm a lot more into football now than anything, just because fantasy has ruined me.
Yeah. I used to play fantasy football, and I actually found out that
don't tell me anything bad about it because I like it.
Oh, for me anyway, because I get pretty competitive. I started to realize that I started to hate football because I started hating people on teams.
Yeah.
I'm like, so I grew up as a Broncos fan.
Okay.
The Elway days, the Orange Crush
TD,
days. And Denver wasn't that far from us here. So I've always been a Broncos fan. And I remember playing fantasy football, and it was like, I think it was really just the internal conflict is I'm rooting against a portion of my team, and maybe rooting for another part of a team, or now I needed points for my defense who's playing against my favorite team, but I didn't want my favorite. It was like,
well, and you're like I need a touchdown,
this hurts my brain.
But it has to go to the tight end.
Oh, yeah. Why are you throwing it there?
Yeah, you definitely have to split that part of it. And I'll say it too when I'm watching. I'm like, this is the reason I hate fantasy.
Yeah, I got really bad. Well, I will say on this, on the football, I love football season when it comes around. And I think the thing that, which is give me a little bit of normalcy back, is the fans have come back. Like honestly, when there are no fans in the stadium, I couldn't watch anything.
I don't even remember last year.
I didn't watch anything.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't watch it without the fans. It's a realization. Goes back to people.
Yeah.
It wasn't that the players were just a small portion of that. The fan base and the noise and that sound and everything else, that's actually what makes the game for me. I will turn on the TV, and my wife doesn't know how this works. But if I can't sleep, I'll turn on a football game, be watching it, and the noise.
Really?
It soothes me. I'm just like, I just love the noise of a football game.
The crowd,
the drums, the F Joe Bidens,
let's go Brandons.
Yeah, let's go Brandons. Seriously, how stupid can some people be? So, oh yeah, but it's again, the people, they start to make a difference. Like the one sport I lost. I've never really been huge into it, but I can't watch the NBA anymore because it's so political.
I struggle. I do love watching basketball, but the last couple of years I just couldn't do it. I just wouldn't support it. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's tough. Like LeBron James has got to be the biggest dork on the face. I can't handle the dude. Of course, I grew up in the era of, I'm a Jordan. Jordan was in my era. So anybody who grew up in the Jordan area is like, Jordan could smoke anybody.
I'm sure they're having a hard time watching NBA the last 5 years.
Oh,
yeah.
It's crazy.
See, I was right at the tail end of all of that, but I remember watching the highlights and then like the documentary on Jordan. Yeah. And I remember all of that happening.
The battles between them and the Pistons.
Yeah, the Pistons.
Bill Laimbeer, Bill Laimbeer's just going to punch in the face or something. It's like,
it doesn't happen now.
Else is like, oh, hey, don't do this. And
you can't have his hand on me when I'm dribbling.
Yeah. What are you doing?
I want to touch on this with you were talking about how power gets to you and how it can be the downfall of men. So do you think, because I've had this thought before, so you had, and I'm going to screw this up. I'm not a smart person, so I'm sure I'm going to miss this. So you had.
I felt like that was like what is
a
it?
given?
No. Who is it that says, I'm not a smart man?
Oh, Forrest?
Yeah, Forrest Gump. I'm not a smart man. Sorry, ADD.
So when you talk about power getting to you and the fall of that, so you talk about Rome, you maybe talk about, England at their power. Is that going to be us, you think? I mean, I just had that thought when you were kind of going through the progression of that. So do you think that, because I'm sure they never thought that they could be conquered or fall or what, I mean, England's not conquered, but you know what I mean? Like the downfall of their world power.
I think I've been thinking about this, and I was listening to some talk radio the other day. I don't know who it was talking about, which is, we have digressed completely as a nation.
100%. Well, not 100%, but we definitely have.
It's bad. But we're still pretty awesome.
Sure.
Who can replace us yet? I don't know that anybody can replace us quite
China?
Yet. I should say replace us of all of our insecurities, all of our screwed up politicians, all of our, our Nancy Pelosi's and California governors and all that stuff that happens. I mean, the people there's still a huge stable group of us, and there's still a lot of free thinkers that are here.
I hope so.
I believe there are. I do. And it feels a little scary at times. And I don't know who can replace that yet. Even with, our currency, our inflation's going to be crazy in the next little while. And there's going to be lots of changes. And, the Dow took a dump today, and it is having an impact on the bond market and everything else. And inflation is going to just devalue more and more of our currency.
Yep.
But who's going to replace that? Who's got the stability to replace that? I don't think it's China's currency is going to replace it. I don't think that there's faith necessarily in China. China's still very communistic, and they're very controlling.
Sure.
They can't replace that. They're going to, in the sense of, to have the innovation, the creativity, and we've lost a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I just don't know what nation has the ability to do that yet. England's not there. They've digressed too much.
Yep.
They're not the innovative. They're not the same free people that are here. There's still a huge amount of us, and there are more. I mean, I'm sorry, more people turned out and voted for Trump than any other president. There's no way that sippy cup Biden won anything.
Old Uncle Joe, man.
we all know that was a fraud. Everybody knows it. Even the people who, it's just a big fraud.
Yeah, I can't even have a conversation with people that, I would love to have more conversations with people that say that that's wrong, but I have a hard time even thinking that you're somewhat educated in anything.
Yeah, he's the most pathetic president that we've ever had. And we've had some pretty bad presidents.
Seeing in my lifetime, Clinton, just because of how he exited. But and I don't even think he was an awful president. I just think how he exited.
Clinton was an awful president. I think he was an evil president. I don't think he did a lot of, he's got some bad stuff to him. His wife is the spawn of Satan.
Sure.
She's a horrible person. In my day, Jimmy Carter, in the younger days, my middle name is Carter, which is interesting. And when I was a kid, I was so embarrassed. My middle name is Carter after
Jimmy.
And I'm like a little kid. And granted, I learned a lot from my parents because my parents hated Jimmy Carter. But it's oh great, what'd you guys name me after this worst president? I'm 5 years old, and I was embarrassed of my name, but Jimmy. It was Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was an awful president. I think.
I guess I skipped over Obama.
Obama was that guy was horrible. He didn't do any good. He created
more division.
100%
at Derick Lake. You got a problem with that.
I think the Bushes didn't do a great job either with some of the stuff. There's a lot of secret stuff that was going on. I tend to lean towards maybe one of the last great presidents we had was Reagan, with what he did and some of his policies and his moral character was probably one of the last really good presidents we had. Of course, I like Trump with what he did.
Sure.
My only frustration with Trump is I just wish the guy was better at his communication. Not communication. Not what he said, because I'm all good for mean tweets and lower gas.
Yeah.
It's just always how he said it. I can't listen to the guy very long. Just his mannerisms and things that he has. But as a businessman and as his ability to not fall in line, and that's why he was hated as much as he did, because he was exposing.
He wasn't a politician.
He wasn't a politician, and I love that guy for that. So I'd say I would consider him one of the great ones as well. Just don't always like his funny, crazy mannerisms at times. Just watching them or listening to him.
I'm only 32. But I think about, I guess what I'm saying is I don't have a ton of experience in life is why I say that. But if you want I drive by the economy. When you're a business owner, unless you thrive off of a low economy somehow, I would always want the economy to be high. And if you want the economy to be high, why wouldn't you want a successful business owner to run the country? And so I always looked at, I guess, deemed successful. I mean, I'm sure he bankrupted a lot of companies too, but but like overall, he's successful. And I would think, why not run one of the most industrious countries as a business for that economy to grow? And what I really liked about him was, hey, we're the U.S. We carry a big stick, and we'll swing that big stick if we're poked. And I feel that's how it should be. I mean, if you guys want us to police the world, we'll come in and we'll police the world. And if you don't want that, then let's get out of all these countries and get all of our money back that they owe us and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I met with my tax guy today, which I suck horribly at.
That's why you're all dressed up.
Yeah. I hate taxes. I owe the IRS a lot, but I feel like they owe me like a tank.
Sure.
And that's, again, problem I have with that is, I would love to see it run more like a business. Again, our local government.
Yeah.
We should be running more like a business. It frustrates me. When I taught at the university, that was my frustration, is so many professors taught based off of philosophy, no application, nor did they have the experience.
Yeah.
I'm like, have you ever run a business? Do you know what it's like to lay awake at night trying to figure out how you're going to pay employees? And you're not even worried about paying yourself. You just want to like pay your employees.
Yeah.
You want to learn about, how do I keep the lights on, or what do I need to do here, or how do I grow? All these things that come into play. How do I deal with insurance and who knows what? I mean, I've went through bankruptcy. I went bankrupt in a business my wife and I had, and it was for multiple reasons with things. But that was one of the greatest. Hindsight is what I learned from that is through that experience. The only way that you're going to learn is by screwing up.
Sure.
But you got to screw up in the real world of things. And that's my frustration with a lot of what's happening today is there's no real world experience. Like, I always tell my students, I'm like, if you're taking an accounting class and your accountant doesn't I should say like an entrepreneur class, and they're not driving like a super nice car or something like that, like, don't take that class.
Yeah.
If you got an accounting class and the guy is, barely making it.
Any type of financial.
Yeah. It's like,
class.
Like if like any of your finance classes, like your professors should have money.
Right. Should understand finance.
Yeah. They should be the ones that are the richest because they understand money. If they're not, then I wouldn't take a class from them. One, if there's we don't choose to have money. I'm like, you really don't want them as a professor because they're already been brainwashed that somehow money is a bad
evil
thing. And it's no. People is what makes things bad. Why is money a bad thing? Again, I teach my students, I tell people all the time, it's like good people who make good money, they do great things.
Sure.
Poor people who make no money, what do they do? Tell me, I'm not against the poor people.
Sure.
But if anybody who is not making any money, what's the impact there? What's the added value? And I get that sometimes we fall on hard times. And it's the same thing. Like government welfare does nothing to help people. A community, every time we have a hurricane, and a community is absolutely devastated, it is not the government who makes a difference. The people come in. People will always take care of people unless it's mandated. It's the craziest thing. And it just goes back to having real world experience. I think our education system is completely broken. I think it's worthless. I love education.
Yeah.
Like I love to learn. But I had to learn and apply it, because what I was being taught didn't make sense until I went out and got punched in the face.
Yeah.
And nobody else could relate to that. I had professors that couldn't relate to it because they'd never done it. They just taught out of the textbooks. Oh, go out and do that. Go try it. You ever run a business? Yeah. You ever start a business? Yeah. You ever have a great idea and it falls flat on its face?
Have you ever failed at business?
Yeah.
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 I mean, when you were talking about having a bankrupted business, one, how you rebound from that. And like, you've obviously learned and had lessons and applied those lessons and maybe dodged those same potholes that you fell into last time. And I've had that conversation with people where I get pitched businesses all the time, and not even for me to be a part of it, but just my thoughts on it. And I just always think like, or I'll ask them, well, I've got this all figured out. And I'm like, you don't have it figured out because you've never failed in one before. Yeah. Like, until you fail in one at whatever level, it's not possible to have the whole thing figured out. But I want to touch on what you were saying, going through bankruptcy, and a lot of that was how you responded to it, and being able to come out from that and having that experience to pass on to other people instead of letting it break you,
Yeah.
Instead of, I just listened to, do you listen to Jocko Willink? Mm-hmm. So have you ever heard his good speech?
I don't know.
And he refers good a lot, but he talks about, I actually wrote it down. I have it on a note card at the store, but he says, if you failed at anything in life, he just goes, good. Now you've got time to build on yourself, to research, to figure out the problem, to move forward, to have more time, whatever it is. Like, he's like, oh, you're an athlete and you got injured. Good. It's time to recover. You didn't get that job promotion. Good. You got time to work on yourself. And taking that response to having a failed business, and it in my mind, when you said that, I was like, good. Now it's time for you to work,
Yeah.
Now it's time to have those experiences and be able to build from it.
Yeah. And for me, I looked at, I screw up in a lot of things in life.
Good.
Yeah.
You're supposed to, man.
That's how it works. Really, sometimes the only way, the best ways that I've learned is through some of those hard experiences and gone through some tough times. I look at, and I try to apply this in my own life. I'm working on it. I do apply it, but sometimes I always have to be reminded of it.
Sure.
When I look at life and the experiences that we go through, in order for anything to exist, its counterpart has to exist. And I don't like to say it's opposite, because sometimes that becomes too defining. But there is a counterpart to everything. So an example, for light to exist, there has to be darkness.
Sure.
If we never had darkness, would we really understand what light is? So everything always has its counterpart. But there's also a spectrum within that counterpart, that if something really bad happens to us, in order for that to happen, also on the other end of the spectrum, the ability for something great is also available. It's there. So it always exists on both ends of the spectrum. And it's a little bit harder concept for people to look at times, but it's also the opposite is true as well. And it feels maybe like the Debbie Downer, that if things are going really, really well, the best they've ever been, well, in order for that to exist, what else has to exist?
Right.
There is the possibility of pure failure, abject failure. And so it's an awareness of what's going on, but then there's also a choice that comes into play. That if I know I've gone through hard times, then I will go through hard times, because that's actually the only way for that counterpart to exist as well. If I go through life with nothing really bad happening to me, I can guarantee nothing really great's happened either. You just stay there. But those who start to experience things in life, every time one of an experience shows up, its counterpart is also available. And we have that choice now, and we can experience that. And experience is really those are really choices as well. And I think that's another part where I think a lot of people struggle with, is we want to blame and say, gosh, because of this, or because of this person, this is how my life has ended up. And I've had my fair share of blaming people with things. And it's even now within our country. It's like, it's hard not sometimes to blame because of, sippy cup Biden, I'm paying $4 at the pump.
Right.
And yeah, sometimes there is some blame that you want to do in there, but what's my experience to it? Am I going to be depressed? Am I going to be happy? Am I going to, maybe angry? I can always choose my experience. And so we will go through experiences that are tough, but it ultimately is our choice as well. And when we accept that choice, we also are open up to the opposite, which we're available. Again, we have to make that choice. And sometimes it can happen quickly. Sometimes it's progression. But that's kind of how our life works. At least it works for me. And so when I look at things in my life, when bad things happen to me, I'll go through my pity party. I'll be pissed off. I'll blame. I'll, blame myself. I'll, woe is me kind of attitude. And then I'll get to a point, kind of that transition of things. I'm like, okay, well, what are my choices right now? I can quit, or I can just keep going. And that's just that transition piece. Well, what is quitting? Well, I don't know what that really means. That means what? Am I going to just stop living? Well, that's not really a choice. So I guess I can't really quit. That just doesn't make sense to me. What does it mean to keep? Well, I'm just gonna try. I'm gonna make it through today. It might just be that for me. And then I get through that little period, and then I get through. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I made it through that day. Well, what was my experience? Well, what's my experience right now? Well, I guess I'm okay. And then I can maybe transition to no, I'm good, or I can be mad. But I have to. There becomes this point where I become accepting of it. Like when I'm really pissed off and I go through this whole emotional thing and I'm angry or I'm sad or something, I'll be in my little pity party for a while, and then I'll think to myself, okay, well, I'm choosing really to be pissed off. Nobody can make me mad. Nobody can piss me off. Okay, that's really my choice.
Yep.
Well, I guess that's not working right now, so, well, I'm going to choose to be okay, or I'm going to choose to be happy. It doesn't have to be completely opposite side, but I'll be like, okay, well, I'm done being angry. I guess I'll choose not to be angry right now. I'm going to choose to be content.
Yeah.
And once I choose to be content, then a little while I'm like, well, I'm happy. And that's my choice.
Right.
And you start to realize you have that much power when it comes to it. So going through a bankruptcy and going through those things, I think during that stage in our life, it was more about, there were so many other pressures that it was really like, oh crap, this is happening. What are we going to do? We're just going to keep going.
Yeah.
That's just what we're going to do. And that was just the choice. Were there hard times? Was there tears at times? Was there frustrations? Was there, oh crap moments? Yeah. Are we ever going to get out of this? Is this going to happen? And it'll be like, well, yeah, what do we do, babe? Well, we'll be fine. Let's just keep going. Do we know what tomorrow's going to bring? No. But
what's coming?
It's coming.
It's coming anyway.
We'll just go tomorrow. Let's be there tomorrow. Let's show up tomorrow. And all of a sudden new opportunities. And so it didn't feel as devastating, maybe looking back at it, than it was, because I guess now I look at more of like, oh yeah, I mean, tons of education. We started that business and I was finishing my master's, my MBA, and I was just like, oh man, it was like lesson after lesson. I'm like, oh man, this is what this really means, is we're starting up this business and doing these types of things. Again, I'm not a business mogul of any sorts. I've just been through hard things, but that's kind of how I approach those types of things, and how I approach that was, oh crap, what are we going to do? I don't know. We're just going to go to tomorrow.
We're going to move forward.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. What do we do? Well, we're going to go to bed, and then we're going to wake up, and we're going to do the next thing.
Yeah.
And it's just, what are we going to do? We're going to quit? Well, what does that mean? I don't know what that really means. I can't even define what that really means. It's just, I'm just going to do the next step. And I take that approach even today with stuff. It's like, oh man, it's like, I do the mortgages, and believe me, I've got more gray since doing mortgages in my life, because I worry about things. I'm like, oh man, this is falling apart, or this is doing this. And I'll get stressed out. I'll get pissed off. And then it's like, oh, what are my choices? I don't know. It's just, I got to go to bed. I'm going to wake up, and then I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to figure it out. And what's interesting I found too is to solve problems, if we're in a state of fear, frustration, confusion, creativity is gone. And so, and I know that every single time, but we have to go sometimes through that cycle to be like, oh, wait a minute. I got to clear my mind. As soon as I can get into the, okay, I'm going to be happy. It starts out with being content, being okay. I can smile, I can laugh. And all of a sudden the problem solving starts happening again. As soon as I can smile, the more you smile, the more you can create.
That's awesome. I like that. I want to touch two things. So when you're talking about you can have success after success and then one thing can derail you, I've learned, I've had, and don't get me wrong, my businesses are not big by any means. I'm very, very small business. I've had other small businesses when I was younger that I would just, close it down in quotations, if that's what you want to call it. I wouldn't pay the LLC renewal, right?
Right.
And what I learned from that was you have to pencil in losses, because you have to be ready for that to happen, because it's going to happen. Unless you're 100% in every decision you've ever made in life, whoever's out there, that's great. But what I learned through my imperfect, uneducated person, when I was 20, starting businesses left and right, I learned that if I didn't have that mindset that things were going to happen, then it would derail me. And I had shut down, 2 businesses come to mind because of that. I had no other thought that I was just going to succeed in everything.
Right.
And so that helped me a lot when I was starting to get into business. The other thing, like you were talking, we went through the bankruptcy, and, we had hard times, we had this. My mind, when I'm having that dialogue in my mind, I always try to think, well, what's the alternative? Like, okay, tomorrow's going to come anyway. We have to push forward. Well, yeah, but there is no alternative. Like, I have to move forward. Yeah. I have to be positive. I have to do these things, because when you say it out loud to yourself or say it in your head, well, what am I going to do? Just sit home and go get a bag of Cheetos, like what's the alternative? Yeah. I have to move forward. I have to be positive. I have to be, I in my mind, I have to do a podcast a week is what we've committed to. I have to run the store. I have to be there. I have to be a dad. I get to be a husband, yeah. And those things that, what's the alternative? I want to do, and I get to do, and I have to do those things.
I think everybody's a little bit different in how they handle some of those, the have-tos. Like, I struggle in the have-to world of things, but in reality, it does run me, because it's like, well, this is what I do, is, I'm just going to get up, after falling down, it's kind of like, it's just what's going to happen with it. But I think where I started to see how in my life and others that I've been around, this idea of, how we respond to those types of things. Because here's the reality. Well, maybe it's not reality. Here's my reality when it comes to it, is everything happens exactly the way it's supposed to happen. And it sounds like that's some crazy philosophical,
yeah,
real crazy thing. But at a very core level is that's what it does. If it were to happen another way, it would have happened another way, and then that's the way it would have happened. It's a very simplistic way of thinking of it.
Don't overthink this.
Yeah, it's just, all of the choices that we make are exactly the choices we're supposed to make. How do I know this? Is because that's what we did. If we would have known at that time to make a better choice, or had the ability to make the better choice, or whatever it might have been, we would have made a different choice. So we've done exactly everything we're supposed to do. We've done our very, very best that we could do. Like, we are on target. Everybody is on target. Now, for some, that can be like this major cop-out with people. Like, I'm just doing the best I can.
Sure.
We can always drive ourselves. But so you take that side of the driven people. We're driven. We're wanting to excel. We have that drive in us. We're pushing ourselves to be uncomfortable at times. For me, my checks and balances is realizing to not beat myself up so much, and not get into I have to do this or I should do this. To I'm going to do exactly what I need to do. I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm not using that as an excuse. But it's just a different way of viewing that my life is working exactly the way it's supposed to be working. It doesn't mean I don't have, bad experiences, good experiences, because again, those are my choice. And I don't have events that happen that are painful. Like, did I choose to have 3 back surgeries in 1 year, 7 years ago? Nope. Was it painful? Yep. But what's my experience from that? Am I a better golfer today? Yeah. Crazy it is. I've had my L4, L5 fused, and I am a better golfer today than I was before it, because I now control. I have better posture when I golf, and I have it's a different thing. I hit the ball farther than I used to. And it's just, again, but it's an experience of how I choose to do that. But the reality is we're all doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't look ahead and say, I want to progress in that sense and do maybe what we perceive to do better. But the reality is I'm not really doing better. I'm working towards different consequences.
You're having
and
a
outcomes.
shift, a pivot.
Because if we always look at things as being better, that means I'm always falling short.
Yep.
And that does have an impact.
That's
on
important.
us. And it impacts me. I mean, I guess I'm much more aware of it because I was the kid that I still do. I still beat myself up. I still have these, like, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not, whatever it might be. I'm not making enough money. I didn't do this. I didn't do this. And I need to do better. No, what I need to do is I want a different outcome. I want a different experience. And it's not because what I did was necessarily bad or wrong. It had a consequence. It could have had a consequence. It's like if I go out and I shoot somebody for no reason, I'm going to have a consequence from that. Right? Does that mean that I did exactly what I'm supposed to do? Well, yeah, I did, because I did it. Okay. I have a consequence, and by the law, it may be considered wrong or everything else. But the reality is there's just a consequence, and I'm going to have to deal with those consequences. My job in life is I'm trying to create different experiences and trying to put myself and not keep looking back and say, well, I should be better, because the reality is I've done exactly 100% to my ability, but now I want a different experience. I want a different choice.
Right.
I want to have a different consequence.
Well, you want to branch off of that straight line.
Yeah.
Like you want to have the different, that makes sense.
It's a different way of thinking. And again, this is my communication background, is words have power, and we beat ourselves up with words all the time. But words are nothing more than assigned meanings that we've given them, and we draw some type of an emotional component to it. It's like, here's a water bottle. Why is this a water bottle? It's because that's what we named it.
Sure.
But if I say, hey, I'm going to call it something else.
You're like, that's a liquid cup.
It doesn't matter. This thing doesn't matter what it's called. I mean, granted, we can get into like the whole speaking to water thing and everything else, but but the reality, we just assign it some name because that's the way that we can communicate. But we assign those words, we assign the meaning to it, and we start to let us affect us a lot more than we should.
I mean, it's like when you tie an emotion to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just because, and the emotion is really, we're just creating an experience. Well, maybe I want a different experience. And those are things that I try to do, daily, and I have to remind myself daily. And it's good to get on a podcast like this because, as I say it out loud, I'm like, oh yeah, what did I do today?
Yeah.
I have a meltdown today. Oh yeah, I had this, or I had this frustration. It's like, well, what was my experience? Well, there was fear, or there was, anger, or whatever. Well, that was my choice. Well, maybe, if I did a better job of paying all my taxes, I wouldn't. I'm going to have a different consequence.
Meeting
and
up
be
with your
like,
tax
oh,
guy.
fetch, I got to go, pay another $3,000 to the IRS, and I'm pissed off because I want my tank back.
Right.
And all the, quit giving money to Pakistanis and
leaving it in,
I get a little
Afghanistan.
If I want a different experience, I'm like, okay, guess what I got to do, Brendan? I got to pay attention a little bit more of where I'm allocating my money, and so I can have a different experience. I can make different choices, and so that's how I approach.
Yeah.
A lot of those types of things. I have to remind myself at times.
Probably 12 to 14 years ago. Gosh, I'm getting old, man, when you can say that. A lot of when I was going through a lot of stuff with my parents, when my dad moved out, I took a lot on my shoulders, even years before that, of kind of making sure the household was still running. I was paying a lot of the bills, different things. Parents get divorced, right? And I had, I don't know, I'm sure I listened to it at some point in time, but I just had like a mental shift, and it's really put me on the path of where I am now. And that was, like you had said, understanding that I control my emotions. And not only that I don't allow you to control my emotions. And so you say something to make me mad. Well, you didn't make me mad. I can control that. And when I had that shift, I would have been, like I said, 20, 22, something like that. I feel like I've reacted to situations a lot more positively. I was a very reactionary kid. I was probably labeled as the kid that would get mad, or I'd freak out, right? I had 3 older brothers that beat me up, and I had never had a release. So
Schoolyard bully.
Yeah.
The schoolyard bully.
I never, I tell people all the time, I never got picked on, but that's because my brothers knew that they were the only ones that got to beat me up. So they would go handle it if someone else ever tried to. But I had so when I was a kid, I had that, reactionary, mad emotions. And a lot of that was the experience that I had growing up with my own dad. And so I guess it makes sense that that's where my mind would be. But when I had that shift, and I've had this talk with a lot of people, and it's extremely important to understand that you control yourself. You might have that split second reaction to things, and you might have those emotions, but how you react to that, you control. And like you were saying, you'd gone through things and had those emotions. It's not a bad thing to express that emotion. I think you should. Keeping that bottled up is going to do nothing positive. Yeah. And so expressing that emotion, have your moment, be mad, but then understand, before you have a reaction to it or make a decision, or, you flip the guy off in traffic or whatever it is, you need to have some type of, sticky note in your mind that, okay, I control how I react to this. I control my emotion. And not only that, I don't want to have anyone else have the power over that emotion. So I focus more on that. I'm not going to give you the power so you can control how I react to things.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that. When I go through those cycles, and I think it's healthy to be okay with those emotions, but I try to tell people, I try to remind myself, and I tell people all the time, if you're going to be angry, then just choose it. Choose to be angry.
Control
absolutely nothing wrong with angry. Now, you may have consequences.
Sure.
Be okay with the consequences, and you can have an experience from those.
But when those consequences come, you know that you chose that, and it was your choice.
They're a choice. You know, if you want to be sad, you know, I've got my oldest is, 26, and, boyfriend broke up with her and all these things. And, it's like, oh, I shouldn't be sad. I shouldn't, all these things. I'm like, or you should be.
Yeah.
And just be okay with it. Just choose it. Choose that experience. If you want to be angry, be angry. And again, usually the process is, for me anyway, of I'm angry, pissed off, whatever it might be, get all heated up, it puts me in a knot with things, and whatever it might be. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I practice what I preach here. And I'm like, okay, I'm angry. Okay, well, now I'm going to choose to be angry. And what I found in my life is, as soon as I get to the point where I believe, and I actually have convinced myself that I have that choice to be angry, I find that my anger doesn't last as long, because human nature is to go to happiness, peace, to, again, the idea of we're going from chaos to understanding, and that's anger to love. As soon as I can make that choice, and I know that it's that part of me, not just talking myself into it, of like, okay, I am choosing to be angry, I find that it's very short-lived, the anger, once I hit that point, because I'm like, and that doesn't work anymore. So I'm not going to be angry.
Yeah, smile.
Yeah, I'm just going to smile, or I'm going to laugh about it. I'm not going to be angry, or maybe it's just, I'm just going to be content. But it's interesting in my life, I've seen that when I can finally hit that point where I'm making that choice, because I try to talk myself into it at times. When I finally believe, like, I've gained that control back, that mentality back of like, I am now choosing to be angry. This is completely 100% my choice. Because I also know that through that choice, I could choose anything else. And okay, if I can choose anything else right now, I'm going to choose to be angry. And once I have complete control of that side of it, it then becomes very, very short-lived. And I'm like, all right, that was good. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting piece. But it's a higher level of thinking. It takes practice. Because the other side to it is, we have, the human psyche has very specific triggers. That's one of the things I loved in teaching, like negotiations and bargaining and those types of courses, which was we can manipulate people all the time, because I can trigger people through words that are used. I can trigger people through tone, inflection. There are things that I can do that I know I can trigger. There are cultural components. We talk about the authoritarian principle, which is, as a professor, I could sit in front of the class and I would teach my kids. I said, one of the reasons why that you are listening to what I am saying is because of this principle of authority, which is, we have a tendency. There's a trigger that says, I recognize him. He is a teacher. I'm a student. There's a difference there. And because he's the authority, I'm going to more likely believe what he says. And so that's why, and we're switching some of that, but that's why if a firefighter runs into this room right now and says, get out of here, it's on fire, the studio's on fire, get out of here, we're going to be like, I'm out of here. That's a firefighter. He knows what he's talking about. That's an authoritarian figure. So those are triggers that help us, and they help us to make decisions in life. We need those things, because we're always finding shortcuts because we're bombarded with information coming in. And so again, there's an awareness factor of like, we have to be much more aware of our triggers. There's one of my favorite authors, and I taught from his book, his name, Dr. Robert Cialdini, and he has a book called Influence. And he does a lot of these social psychology type of experiments. But he gets into this idea, one of the first principles he talks about is the click whir, which is this triggering that happens. And they see it in animals all the time where they'll have a turkey, talks about like a turkey and a polecat. And for all you Southerners, you know what a polecat is. You know, it's
I have no idea what that is.
Kin to a raccoon.
Okay.
Okay. And you know, one of the, you know, polecats love eating turkeys, baby turkeys especially. And so there becomes this, you know, just they always thought that the sight of a polecat is what triggered, you know, the mother turkey to defend her chicks and everything else. Well, they took a stuffed polecat and then they put in a noise that a mother turkey or a baby chick would make, this whirring noise that a baby chick would make. And they found that all of a sudden that turkey would actually coddle that stuffed polecat because of that noise. It was just a trigger.
Yeah.
And we're a little bit more
Advanced.
technical and advanced than just a polecat and a turkey, but there are a lot of things that do trigger us, certain noises. I mean, think of certain sounds or whatever it might be. It's like listening to a ball game. If I smelling grass and dirt, there's a very specific smell that's gonna, if playing baseball, there's that smell of dirt and grass that takes you back to the times of playing ball.
Sure.
And so those triggers help us make decisions, and they happen at a very subconscious level. And so we can be triggered very easily. We just have to go through that. How can we recognize those much more often? How can we become aware of them? And so now we come into situational awareness, where we know of situations that could trigger certain things. So when they do happen, now we're aware of them. It gets super fascinating, and I can get really geeky on this type of stuff. But the whole point of, are we in control of our emotions? Yes, but does it happen? Are we always going to be like, something happens and I'm like, oh, I'm in complete control? No, a lot of times what happens, because we're built to make decisions quickly, the triggers that happen will often trigger a response from us, the fight or flight type of thing. We don't want, if something bad is happening, we don't want to be like, well, let me think about this. Let me process this for a minute, and now I'm dead, or now I got beat up, whatever it might be. We have certain things like, bam, trigger, we automatically have a reaction. And so we have to look at, and this is where sometimes people beat themselves up, is like, I need to be able to control my emotions a lot more. You need to just start being aware and to recognize them, because we're built off of triggers. We have reactions because that's how we survive and that's how we make decisions. So people are going to trigger you. They're going to sounds that trigger you. They're going to be the way things are done and actions. And those are really just how we make decisions. We just have to become much more aware of them. Like, I'm going to get triggered at certain things. People are going to piss me off. They're going to say certain things. We just have to be aware. That's where, if somebody calls you a certain name, there are certain people, it's like the old, it's like, oh, you called me, the old Western movies, you called me a yellow-bellied, something or whatever. And it's like, well, those are fighting words.
Yeah.
You called my mama this or something like that, and that's a trigger, and it just moves right into a reaction, and so it becomes a very subconscious programming that comes into play. So our job is just to become much more aware of the triggers and situations. You look at, you hear it all the time. Jocko Willink's and things that. They talk about being situational aware, which is, what could happen? How do I plan for it? And what can I do if one of those triggers occurs? And what are those things that trigger me? The other part that I get frustrated with some of these gurus, it just doesn't work for me, which is, this whole idea at times like, you just got to be laser focused. You just got to be laser focused. Well, if you're laser focused, you lose awareness. You lose the ability to maybe recognize the certain triggers. Yeah, you can be focused. I always like to tell people, it's like, be focused and aware. It's focused awareness. So yeah, I'm focused in on a goal. I want to accomplish this. But I also have to be aware of what else is going on or what could happen. I'm not focused on it, But just like you said, I know those things could happen. And I have maybe my contingency plans where I'm just aware, but I'm still focused here.
Yeah.
So that's how I try to look and I'm not always good at it, like with my life and things that are happening, is like, I want to be focused in on it. And it's hard for me because I really am ADD. Like I have ADD, and there's shiny things all the time. And my personality is, I do love to create. I hate the details of things. I hate getting into it. Like, I'll start it, I'll get it going. Here's the project. Here's the big picture. Here's how this.
Do A, B, and C.
You person do the mundane details. Like, that's going to bore me to death. That's not going to be fun for me.
Yeah.
Like, you run the spreadsheets. I'm
on to the next thing.
I'm going to create the thing, and I'm going to let's look at this and how does this work and everything else. So I have to focus, try harder to make sure I'm focused and not let the awareness become my distraction. And I think a lot of people deal with that.
I think that pops up in my head a lot of firearm training that I've had. And it's like, the best way they illustrated it, I don't know if you've been to Front Sight.
Yep.
They do your shoot. If it's still a threat, shoot in the head. Yeah. But then you're always looking back and forth, like being aware of everything that's around you. And it's like, yeah, be focused in on the project or the threat, but you also need to be aware of your surroundings and the contingency plans or the choices. And if you made those choices, then you have your consequences and so on and so forth.
I think there's always a fine line too, because I remember they brought this up at Front Sight, is I think it's being conscientious during that as well, because we can establish new triggers and new subconscious patterns. I talked about, for a long time, it was, what was it? Every time you'd go through something, it was like click, rack, click.
Rack, tap, and whatever.
Yeah, rack, tap, and shoot or something like that. And it became a pattern. And it was, now when there was a threat, instead of assessing it, they went through a triggers like threat, rack, tap, shoot, and they shot people before they made the assessment. And so we're always trying to establish, these patterns. Same thing with going to Front Sight. And I laughed I remember going through that, and there's a lot of intensity to it, and I was getting focused, I was getting into it. And I remember that night after the first day of training, I'm back at the hotel room, and they teach, at least when I was there, they teach an offset stance. Yep. A little bit.
Weaver stance.
Yeah. And so with that stance, they just ingrain that in you. And so I remember that night I'm like, oh man, I gotta go take a leak. So I go, go to stand up at the toilet, and I'm like standing there, and my feet are offset. Like, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not even like,
You're like peeing on the plunger.
Yeah. Like my body's facing, the back of the toilet, but my legs were still offset because it now had become like already ingrained in me.
That I
was like struggling to pee straight.
Do you shoot that way? Do you shoot offset?
I shoot a little bit offset.
Okay. I mean, I always have.
Yeah, I think for me it's just the natural position. I think it goes back to, my dad was a black belt in karate.
Okay.
And so he taught us as kids, the defensive stance, and your job is to make you a less target. And so I always have always had that in talking, even when I talk to people, unless I go through more of an intimidation factor of things, of how I stand and talk to people. If I, there's lots of different ways. Threatening, non-threatening is how we often talk to people.
Sure.
And sometimes there's also a comfort level, because a threat posture can also be a comfort posture depending on the relationship we have with people. Mm. So sometimes what can be like full facing, puffed up chest type of thing can also be a comfort posture when friends are talking. So
interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting with how it's just awareness and how we talk. So I know how long have we been in?
Well, I want to touch one thing before we get done with this. You're a loan officer. You know a lot about the area and the housing. Do you think there's a bubble? Do you think there's a housing bubble?
Depends on how we define bubble.
Okay.
It's kind of like global warming.
Okay.
Is the weather going to change? Yes, it's going to change. Is the housing market going to change? Yes.
I guess how I would,
but it's not going to be like it was in 2008.
yeah, I'd say that's how I would put it. Of course, that's the only housing, drop I've ever lived through.
The reason why the housing market blew up in 2008 was the way that it was set up. It was during that time. My claim to fame was I was the worst loan officer on the face of the planet because everything was set up in a way that, like, if you had really good credit, that's really the basis of it. Oh, you have good credit? How much money do you make? Because you can just state it. Somehow your credit, having good credit, was attached to your ability to tell the truth.
It makes sense.
And then there are tons of programs that people could get into that were very enticing, but they didn't have the backing, so to speak, that if something ever happened, there's no way that they could repay the loan. There are people who are getting loans that were well above their means of what they could pay for, but there was a program which had what they call negative amortization, neg-am loans, that you were actually paying below the principal of that loan, and the difference was actually being tacked on the back of the loan.
Yeah.
And and people always had this idea, and they had different arms, or these 5-1 arms. It's like, okay, your rate's super low here, but then you're going to have this massive balloon payment, or the rate's going to really adjust higher. But people always have this idea that well, in 5 years I'm going to be making so much more money. I'm like,
are you?
I'm like, you work in Maverick, and
you're living in $1 million home.
You're living in $1 million home, and your job is, the managers at Maverick make good money, decent money, but like you're making hot dogs, and that's, what are you doing to change that?
But my credit score's
but my credit score is great, so I can have as much money as I want. And so, when that subprime market finally came crashing down, it was just based off of there was nothing to back it. People couldn't, when the loans came due or then the arms made the adjustments, nobody could do it. And with this market, the biggest bubble that we're facing now, to me, is just the overall economy. We've dumped trillions of dollars. And Mallory, if you can hear me, Google, how long does it take to count to 1 trillion? It's like 330 something years, I think. If you were to count to 1 trillion. I don't know. I don't even know if my speakers or my headset's working. It doesn't feel like they are, but I know to count to 1 billion, it's like 30 something years. Count 1 second at a time.
People don't understand how much $1 billion is. They don't understand.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It says a trillion. A trillion is
like
1,000 billion.
So we've dumped all these trillions and trillions of dollars in the market.
I'm sorry, Mallory. What was that?
I don't think my headset's working.
Okay. A trillion is 1,000 billion, so you'd need to be counting for 31.7 thousand
31.7 thousand years
for a
so
trillion.
Crazy.
To count to 1 trillion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you not hear me? Oh. Well, we got a headset problem, but we're good. We can keep going.
I haven't worked for a while. I could kind of tell. It's a little muffled sounding, but yeah, that's an insane amount to try to count to that number.
And that was just...
And that's what we're doing all the time. We're just
dump.
Yeah, we're going to dump $15 trillion. I'm like, you can't even count to that in 3 lifetimes. And 1 second at a time, never stopping. It's just an insane number. And so we've got a major inflation thing that's going to be happening. Somehow they're going to keep trying to prop it up. But we've already seen inflation hit, and we know gas prices are up. We're starting to see the other part to that too, which is the incentive to work the same, because if I put in people are like, well, raise the minimum wage. Well, that's not
Doesn't
the answer
solve
as
everything.
well. I mean,
Yeah.
all that does is it adds more to the inflation side of it.
Well, and not only that, when the minimum wage goes to $15 an hour, now me and you are making less money.
Yeah. So what do? We pass that on to the consumers, and
Yeah.
we say, okay, well, I've got to recuperate that
Yep.
as well. So everything just goes up in price. Minimum wage doesn't help anybody. It actually hurts more people, because the reality of what's going to happen is, now we have, with this market, if we pump all these trillions in, and the dollar becomes less. Now we're still having an issue, and the government's going to come in and bail people out, because people are like, I could work for $15 an hour. I could work 40 hours a week, and I still can't make it.
Yeah.
That's pretty depressing. How does someone say, well, I'm just going to keep up and work my tail off and still not make it? Or maybe if I just go on welfare, or I,
Right.
whatever it is, or I, start stealing, or whatever it is, I give up. And I think that's what we're going to see more and more of. And I think that's the scariest part to it. I think we're going to see a bigger gap in the classes, a little bit more with things. They're working really hard right now to, again, conspiracy theory side of things, but the controlling classes, the government, is, if they can help you make less money or give you things, they control you.
Right.
And once they control you, that's, again,
And the short story to that is they
Yeah.
control you by giving you that.
Yep.
Now you want it, so you vote for them.
Yep. It's just a drug that
Yeah.
happens every single time. And there's, they try to de-incentivize the middle class, the entrepreneur. They make it tougher. It drives me insane. This whole idea of people and the mentality that people have that the rich should be taxed more.
Oh, dude.
It drives me insane.
Blows
because,
me
I
away.
look at they're already taxed way too much, if you ask me. I think actually they should be rewarded,
Sure.
because how many jobs
Exactly.
have they created? How many? I look at Donald Trump. How many people, how many jobs does he create with Trump Enterprises, with all those hotels?
Google that, Mallory. See if
Yeah.
you can look up how many people Donald Trump employs.
Yeah. Look at Amazon,
Yeah,
Bezos, and all that he's done.
I mean, what do you think? There's hundreds of thousands of people that are employed by? Or you think it's just thousands?
Yeah, it's hundreds of thousands.
It's gotta
of
be.
people. It's just, it's huge with what they do. Why are they the bad people? They're the ones that took the risk. They're the ones that had the idea. They're the ones that,
Laid up at night
they-
wondering how
they
they're going to
should
pay
be
employees.
rewarded.
Yeah.
like when people, well, it goes back to the principle of what you resist will persist. If people are angry because people are making more money, you will always be poor. It's just how it is.
100%.
If you are happy for people who make good money, you're gonna have more opportunities to make good money. So it drives me that drives me insane. So
I've argued with wealth managers about this, and they've argued that we need to tax the rich more. I'm like, are you high? Like, I'm like, dude, you work with these people every day, and I've spelled this out for them, and they still they resist me and argue with me.
And look at where they're at. They're not. Yeah, they don't make good money. They're just getting by, and they have a very limited belief system.
Yeah.
For my educated way of explaining how these people are is they literally are stupid.
Well, there you go.
Because they refuse to really look at what wealth does.
Yeah.
What good people who make good money can do.
Sure.
They may focus on, this bad person does this, or this bad person. Yeah, there's bad people. But last time I checked, the prison system was not overrun by wealthy people who were killing other people, and it's the people who are often at the poverty level who make up most of what's in our prison system.
That's a good point. I never thought of that.
Yeah. Are there bad people who are very wealthy?
Sure.
Oh yeah.
There's also good people in prison.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, it's just interesting. It's just the ability, people just, they don't have the ability to think. And again, it's just, there's a brainwashing that goes in there. And it's really a limited belief system, I believe. I think that if somebody comes to me and is like, oh, I think you should tax the rich more. My first thought is you have low self-esteem because you don't believe you're worth making money. You've got self-esteem issues. Your self-worth is pathetic.
Yeah.
Anybody that comes to me and is like, it's, the rich or this or this or this. I'm just like, you have no self-worth. You have no belief that you are worth something. Right. And so you're attacking it to try to make yourself feel better.
Exactly.
And it just comes down to that you have no self-esteem. You have no self-worth. If you attack the rich or you try to demonize people who make money, it's because you just don't believe you can do it. And so because of your limited belief system, you are trying to justify it. Because again, you're trying to go from this idea of chaos and frustration. I want to make sense of it. So I'm going to try to justify it by attacking somebody who is doing it. Mm-hmm. That happens in everything. It's the same thing with, athletes, some athlete that's gifted. Well, I hate them because they're gifted. No, be happy for them. But it's because you don't believe that you're good enough and you're comparing yourself to it. So to me, somebody says something like that, I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry that you have no self-worth.
Yeah. Well, who's that guy?
Pathetic.
Like Charlie Kirk, I think's his name. He does the change my mind stuff.
Yeah.
And he'll entertain the thought of that, and then he'll turn it back on him and say, okay, so if you were getting taxed 80%, you'd be okay with that? Or 92% or whatever they were trying to come it out to. And they'd be like, well, I shouldn't be taxed that. Yeah. And it's like, well,
why do you think they should?
Right.
Again, I think it's a self-worth, which most things come down to in life, which is our self-worth, our self-esteem, and what we believe. So, when it comes to, again, go back to the economy and the housing market where it's at, I don't think I think we're going to see a little bit of a leveling. We've already seen some leveling. I think we're going to see a little bit of drop in prices. And I really just think that that's the market correcting itself from a frenzy that often takes place with, again, uncertainty. We saw a lot with the changeover in our administration. Rates were still good. There's a little bit of a lagging trend when it comes to rates in the economy. So I think there was a huge frenzy. It was a big buying spree. But the other part is people are still exiting, California. They're still getting out of those places. They're still tired of being taxed. We are worse off in taxation without representation than we were with our founding fathers. What's happening to us, they fought and created a new country. We are our tax money and stuff is going, like I said, to Pakistan for stupid reason. We're leaving billions of dollars and of our armory and the hands of the enemies. We're constantly.
And if you disagree with that, Google what that means. Yeah, taxation without representation. Google it, and understand what it means. And if you don't agree with that, then let's talk.
We look at it. People are like, well, we've elected our representatives. Yes, we have. And again, it's frustrating because we have a lot of uneducated people who are electing people.
Sure.
Based off of, they have an R behind their name or a D behind their name. Our state's a good example of that. We have one of the worst senators face of the planet.
I agree.
And who was elected because of he belongs to the predominant religion.
Right.
And he's got an R behind his name.
And he's Republican, supposedly.
And that guy's a piece of crap. He's horrible. He's a Romney. The Romneys have been around and da-da-da. Yeah. So we just have a lot of uneducated people, and they don't understand what that really means when, taxation representation is. Yeah, we have people who aren't doing their job as voters, and the other side to it is, if I didn't vote for us to leave all that equipment over there. I didn't vote for us to leave our people there. And
we're talking about pulling out of Afghanistan if someone's not following us.
Yeah. So it's frustrating to see some of those things that are happening. But again, economy here, we're going to see a bit of a leveling, I think. I think we're going to see interest rates are going to continue to rise in housing. So now's the good time. Like, still have a lot of people calling me like, yeah, I think I need to refi. I'm like, yeah, now's a good time, because I do plenty of refis with people in there, 3.75, 4%. I think we're going to be back there sooner than we think.
Where are we at? 2 something now?
We're still in the high 2s and that in itself is also very deceptive. Like, you'll see billboards and you'll see people be like, oh yeah, I know, we can get you for 2 point whatever. And yeah, you can, but most of the time it's like, you've got 800 credit score.
Yeah.
You've put 20% down. There's a lot of factors that come into play. So yeah, I mean, we still, that A credit level is, you're still in the 2%. And if you lessen it, a 15-year, you get even lower interest rate, and there's all sorts of things. I'd say the majority of people, who are average credit score, I mean, you're still low 3, even 3, some even 2.9 for a lot of people based off credit score, man. Which is still phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I can remember, 6.5, people were like, man, I got 6.5, that's awesome. And
well, like kids my age, when I talked to them about it, because that's what we did. We bought a lot. We were trying to build a house. We were trying to push everything forward. And then COVID hit, and we're like, should we really be doing this right now? And my final thing was, like, I don't know if we'll see interest rates like this again. And so I would, or at least, in the next 10 years, and I don't want to wait 10 years to build. And so we pushed forward because of that. And people are like, dude, I don't know. There's so much uncertainty. And I'm like, you don't understand that when our parents bought their first houses, you're talking like double-digit interest rates. I'm getting an interest rate for less than my car loan.
Yeah.
It's
crazy. And the other side to it, that there's also a level of, if you correlate like living wage and interest rate, there's a pretty close correlation for the most part. And we got offset, I think, a little bit with what's happening now. Mm-hmm. But I think back in the, our parents or whatever, it's like, hey, they're making, good money, making $40,000 a year, and interest rates, were this much or whatever. But their debt to income and things, I mean, they were pretty close. Like now we're like, a $600,000 loan and, 2%. It's not that far off to what their payments were. And
good point.
Yeah. So there's some things that, I mean, there's always some differences. My biggest concern is when we hit the periods of where we're going to see inflation. So now the dollars are going to become less, which means that things are going to cost more.
Right.
So give you an idea, there's certain loan limits that people can have that will, for certain loan programs. So when you look at a conforming loan, which there's limits of like, okay, we have, 548,250. So 548,250 is the max you can get for a conforming loan here in the southern Utah. And most of the United States, like there's certain areas, pockets that have higher areas that they somehow come up with their magic ball. And they're idiots at adjusting those. Like all places here in Utah, out in Tooele has a higher conforming loan limit than Washington County. And Washington County is so much more higher than Tooele, but Tooele has a higher conforming loan limit. The conforming loan limit is basically allows you to have it's a loan that's backed by Fannie, Freddie, has certain kind of, you get better rates with it and everything else. Well, they've already come out and said, well, the banks are already guessing, certain banks are, and the one we work with, that our American Pacific Mortgage, just says, well, we're going to hedge that instead of waiting till January, February when they make these adjustments. We think they're going to be around over 600,000. I think it's 611, and so we can offer those conforming loan limits.
They're already doing that.
Already doing it, but what that tells me is the prices are going to go up, and I think the prices are going up because our dollar bill is going to be worth less. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing a little bit of leveling, but I think we're going to see a continued increase. And part of those prices going up is you're going to see interest rates creep up a little bit more. I don't know if it's not going to go crazy, I don't think, but I bet we'd be, in another year, we're going to be out of the twos for sure.
I talked to a guy today. I delivered a safe to him, and he built a home in Entrada, in the cliffs in Entrada, if that's part of Entrada. Anyway, the cliffs. And they just built it. They were planning on living there. It's right up against the hill, beautiful view. It's worth, well, I guess he didn't tell me the dollar amount, but it's worth more now than when they started building and had the loans and all that go through. He's paid cash for the entire thing. Now he's now paid cash for the whole thing. So he's not going through construction loans and all that. They just put it up on the market for $2.5 million. And he was telling me, they're leasing in Sun River while they build this house. And then they were going to live there, but now that they're selling it, they're trying to find another house to live in. Yeah. And so he went over to Green Springs, and they put a cash offer down for 10% over the asking price, and they didn't get it. And so I'm telling him, I'm like, well, yeah, dude, but it's you guys. He's from California. I'm like not being rude, but like, it's you guys that are causing that problem. Like, it's not us. Like, we're getting priced out of our own homes, and I was trying to explain that to him, and he's like, well, yeah, but I just don't understand how I offer this much more. And I'm like, well, dude, like, you're the one causing the problem.
Yes and no. On one side, I can see, them wanting to get out of California. I don't blame anybody for wanting to get out of California.
I don't even want to go there on vacation.
Yeah, with some of the stuff that's going on. The other side to it, supply demand. We didn't have the supply.
Sure.
We're getting more of that in. The other side that's always haunted southern Utah is, and part of that is because it is a little bit of a destination, a retirement community, is we don't have good housing for the worker, so to speak.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of common, and again, you could go back and say, well, that's because everybody's coming in and buying up all these homes, but then that's also creating jobs. But then it's just we live in a really weird part of the state with things. We're getting a little bit more, more economical priced housing projects coming in. But it's going to bring in a whole different genre of people with things. So come in with more problems and also create more opportunities. I don't know. It's just really, really interesting when you start looking at the dynamics of the housing market and where it's going to go. Ultimately, if there is any type of crash, it's a full economic downslide of what's going to happen. The other side too is when it comes to real estate, from just a supply demand type side and looking at the basic economics, real estate's always a good investment. Sometimes it may take longer, but real estate isn't, I mean, there's all the land that's out there is all the land that's out there.
True.
We have to develop what we can develop.
Yeah.
But that in itself is a true supply demand, which is there's a limited resource of land. Land's a pretty good investment for that side of things. There's also a side for me where I look at it. In my office, I have 2 pictures on my wall. I have one of a gun that I built, and the other one is some goats
Okay.
that I took pictures of. And that's my wife's, who loves that picture. And of course, I love the picture of the gun that I built. And it's to remind me that I also want land that I can be self-sustaining, one that we can have goats on and one that I can shoot my guns on. And I think should be a goal for everybody, is this idea of like, yeah, land is a good investment, but there's going to be some changes. The economy's changing. It's, how do we just prepare ourselves? And everyone, it's always going to freak people out. Like what you did was, hindsight, it was the right thing, but even during that time, it was still the right thing. Yeah, we don't know exactly what the market's going to do. We don't even know exactly how long this administration is going to keep going this way. If it does all go to hell in a handbasket, I think the important thing is, make sure we have guns, ammo, some good food supply.
Yeah.
I don't think people are waiting. If people are waiting to buy, I don't think it's going to get better, because even if prices drop a little bit, we're going to deal with inflation. So,
because I was going to say the cliche of, well, I'll wait for everything to come down.
Yeah.
And I was done waiting. I was like, we're moving forward.
I think we're done waiting. I don't think it's, I think that's bad thinking. It's just fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
So it's better to make a decision, for people to say, well, I'm just going to wait and hang on. We're in a rapid acceleration of deterioration, is the way I look at it. We do. Land is still important. People are moving still. They're still trying to fit within Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is food and shelter. We want those types of things. Now's the time to do it. Not tomorrow. Now's still the time to do it. Figure out a way to find property, to find a house, have those needs, and then, make sure you're stocking up on everything else. Because I don't foresee, at least in the immediate future, when you just pump that much money into the economy, it can't just be a new administration come in and still make it better. I mean, that's a freaking ton of money.
Yeah.
And every administration keeps doing it.
Right. Just printing it.
So
just printing money.
Yeah. It's not going to last. So I think there's always, we're going to see one side's going to be a leveling. Like, I think we'll see house prices go down a little bit, but our dollar bill is also going down a little bit.
Yeah.
So is it really that our house prices are going down, or is it just that it's just following the trend of that it's really just our dollar bill is going less?
Yeah.
And so we see this. I'm sure there's a little variation there, but that's kind of my belief.
All right.
In the way I see it.
Well, I got to clarify. I'm not dogging people moving here, because that drives half of my business, man. I sell a lot of safes to everyone moving to St. George. So please come to St. George, get a loan from Brendan, and then buy a safe from me.
It's funny. I mean, change is hard for everybody, but I look at people that are moving here, for the most part, are just because they have a lot of the same values.
Yeah.
Again, they may be different in certain things, but I think there's a lot of things that are common. I think a lot of it just gets politicized. And there are certain people here who, they've been trained in certain things, and they, leave one area and they still try to do some of the same stuff that's here. But that's going to happen anywhere.
Sure.
But I think the majority of people who are coming to St. George, like, hey, come on, man.
coming here for a reason.
You're coming here for a reason, and we'll come join our community and
Be a
buy
part
some
of it.
guns, buy ammo, buy safes. Let's all protect each other, and let's have each other's back.
I think almost every California person that comes in my store, I'll be like, oh, so where, are you from here? And they'll be like, oh, well, no, we're from California, but we're not those California people.
I know, that's why you're here.
I always have to laugh. I just like that they have to preference that, because I'm sure all the time they're like, oh, more California people. And I'm like, come on over, man. You got the money to drop down on a vault door. Let's do it.
No. I mean, it's just, I look at it for the most, why are they coming? It's because they share the same values.
Yeah.
And growth will always come with, issues, but that's just the nature of growth.
Sure.
Like, hey, you're from California and you want to come to St. George because you share the same values as we do. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
And in their community that was small, that is now big, they used to have those values and they don't anymore, and they see it here, so they come here. I mean, I've gotten that quite a bit too. They've just seen all the changes through the last 2 decades, and they have researched that we are what they used to be, and so they come here.
Yeah. Change is inevitable.
Yep.
Growth and improvement are optional. And it's really our job is to continue to grow and improve. And if it gets too big for us, for you, for me, well, that's the beauty of our ability to choose. It's like, hey,
Yep.
let's cruise up to Beaver, whatever it might be. Let's
then
we
go
always
find
have
the
that
place.
choice.
We go find the place that used to be what it is right now.
That's just how we work, and that's just how cities work and what we do. I think it just goes back to, from what I think we started with, a lot of this is it's people. We do need to care about people. We need to embrace those who are creating value as well, and trying to find the commonality with people. And there's going to be frustrations that come with it, with certain things, and that's just because if we focus too much on the differences, it's going to suck. I mean, I look at, if it wasn't for California, I mean, my wife was born in California. Like, I got a smoking hot wife, and she is from California. So, hey, grateful for the state of California, because that's where my wife was born. And
there
she
it
was
is.
raised there, and then later moved on. Her dad worked for the Park Service, so she raised up in Colorado as well. And so, I don't have any issue with that.
Yeah.
Unless you're just being a menace to society and just trying to cause problems, and then I'll make my choice and act the way I act. And
don't want none, won't be none.
That's right.
All right, man. I think we wrap it up. We're nudging close to 3 hours, so
setting a record here. So if you have hung on this far and listened to this whole thing, like,
1, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and 2, get a life. No, just kidding. No.
People want to hear what you have to say, man.
I don't know.
Well,
it's just fun to sit back and
it's
talk.
Honestly, it's like therapeutic for me too. As much as I don't love being in front of all of this, but just sitting down, and mainly it's been people I know and my friends that have been on so far, and so just sitting down and having a couple hours just to connect. I mean, that's worth it to me.
It's really 3 hours.
Almost.
Holy crap. My wife's probably calling me. I turned my phone off.
If people want to get a hold of you, we have Dallama gear.
Yeah. The easiest way is, I've actually kind of lessened that a little bit more. One of them is COVID. So we have companies that, we're building merchandise for us and things like that, and they just went under. With things, and shuttered a lot of their stuff. And so that's slowed down considerably with some of that stuff. But the best way to get a hold of me is just social media.
Yeah, and we'll tag you in all these little clips in the videos.
My social media accounts, from my my Dallama Gear social media, to my Dalley Llama photography, to my Apply with Dalley, to
Pew Pew Pine Nuts.
Pew Pine Nuts, whatever it might be out there that I have. You can usually get a hold of me on social media. I do a lot.
Facebook, Instagram.
Facebook, yeah.
You're doing the dances on TikTok.
Not yet. I have a few videos that I've uploaded. Some of me blowing up things and stuff, like shooting stuff and blowing up stuff, and
Awesome.
doing a few things, but
Okay.
getting there.
Well, if you're still sticking around, we appreciate it. Like, share, rate, all of that good stuff. I need to be better at that because I'm not very good at like, hey, get the message out. So that's my thing I need to work on. I'm going to write it down.
No, that's a good thing. If you like something, I think that's another thing, is like, that's a different way, another way that you can help promote the good.
Yeah.
Because we have a tendency, and this is all you listeners, I mean, there's a tendency, and I'm the same way, which is if something goes wrong, we're going to throw we're going to let a bad review happen.
Yep.
But I think we will do better, and again, we will create more success if something happens good, something you have good service. That's the thing that we all need to do. I need to do a better job of it well, is like, make sure you leave the good review. Make sure you share it. If you start sharing good things, more good things happen. You leave a good compliment, you leave a good rating, it helps promote goodness. And that's really what we want. And that takes effort.
Yeah.
It takes effort to tell people that they've done a good job and that they're appreciated. It doesn't take a lot of effort to tell people that they suck.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
And that's when people will do it.
Yep.
When they're irritated
Yep.
and they'll go jump on a review.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think that's a good way to end it. So we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Thanks, Derick.
Thanks, man. Thanks for being here.